Imagine yourself in a quiet room, a meeting. You have spent days preparing, crafting an idea you believe in. When the moment comes, you present it with clarity, with a quiet passion. And then, a colleague, with a dismissive wave of their hand and a casual tone, picks it apart, not on its merits, but with a cynicism that feels personal. They interrupt, they mischaracterize your point, and the conversation moves on, leaving your idea and a part of you behind. In that moment, a heat rises in your chest, your throat tightens. The rest of the meeting is a blur. The feeling follows you out of the room, into your car, and sits with you at your dinner table. A simple interaction, a few careless words, have seemingly stolen your peace. You replay the scene, rewriting the script in your mind, thinking of all the things you should have said. You feel unseen, disrespected, and a quiet anger simmers just beneath the surface, a bitter taste of injustice. This feeling is deeply familiar to so many of us. It is the feeling of being at the mercy of the world, a fragile vessel tossed on the waves of other people's moods, words, and actions. We walk through life in a state of low-grade defense, bracing for the next slight, the next frustration, the next moment that will throw our inner world into chaos. We build our happiness on a fragile foundation, a silent contract we make with the universe, that if everyone else would just behave as we expect, then, and only then, could we be at peace. But what if this entire premise is flawed? What if that colleague, that person who cut you off in traffic, that family member who always pushes your buttons, is not the source of your suffering, but merely a messenger? What if your reaction, that hot surge of anger, that lingering resentment, says very little about them and reveals a profound and liberating truth about you? This is the invitation of an ancient wisdom, a path that sees life not as a series of external events to be endured, but as a curriculum designed for our own awakening. It suggests that every encounter, especially the difficult ones, is a sacred opportunity, a mirror held up to us. It asks us not to change the world, but to understand ourselves. For within that understanding lies a peace that no one can ever take from you, because every single person you meet is here to teach you something about yourself. Let us return to that moment of impact, the sting of a dismissive word, the feeling of being wronged. It is a profoundly personal experience. We say, "He insulted me. She disrespected me. They hurt my feelings." The central pillar in all of these statements is the word me, the word I. We feel the offense so acutely because it seems to strike at the very core of who we are. But this begs the most fundamental question we can possibly ask. Who exactly is this I that feels so wounded? Before we can understand the mirror that others hold up to us, we must first dare to look at the one holding the mirror. We must investigate this self, this identity that we spend our entire lives protecting, promoting, and defending. For most of us, this self feels as real and solid as the ground beneath our feet. It is the protagonist of our own inner movie, the CEO and the headquarters of our mind. It is a rich and complex collage, assembled over decades. It is our name, our face in the mirror, the sound of our own voice. It is our history, a carefully curated collection of memories, triumphs, and traumas that we tell ourselves is our story. It is our collection of roles: a parent, a child, a worker, a neighbor, an American. It is our web of beliefs, our political affiliations, our religious or non-religious stances, our tastes in music and food. This self is a fortress we are constantly maintaining. We reinforce its walls with achievements and possessions. We decorate its halls with the approval of others, and we stand guard at its gates, armed and ready to defend it from any perceived attack. When our colleague dismissed our idea, it wasn't just an idea that was rejected. The fortress of I felt a tremor in its foundations. The attack felt real because we believe the target, this self, is real, solid, and separate from everything else. This is the first and most profound illusion the Buddha's wisdom asks us to examine. The invitation is not to annihilate the self, but to see it for what it truly is. Not a solid entity, but a fluid process. Not a noun, but a verb. In this ancient view, What we call the self is a temporary gathering of 5 distinct, ever-changing processes known as the 5 aggregates or skandhas. Imagine sitting by a flowing river. You can point to it and say, "That is the river," but the water you are pointing at is never the same from one moment to the next. Our self is like that river. The first aggregate is form or rupa. This is our physical body. We think of it as a solid thing, my body, but it is in a constant state of flux. Cells are dying and being born, air is flowing in and out, food is being processed and expelled. The body you have today is not the exact same body you had 7 years ago. It is a process, a pattern of energy, not a static object. The second aggregate is feeling, or vedana. This refers to the raw, immediate sensations that arise from contact with the world, categorized into 3 simple types: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. The warmth of the sun on your skin is pleasant. The sting of the harsh word is unpleasant. The feeling of your clothes against your skin is likely neutral until you bring your attention to it. These feelings are like the weather of the mind, constantly changing, arising, and passing away. We suffer when we try to cling desperately to the pleasant ones and violently push away the unpleasant ones, forgetting that they are all, by nature, fleeting. The third is perception, or sana. This is the faculty of recognition, the part of the mind that puts labels on things. When your eyes see a shape and your mind says tree, that is perception. When your ears hear a sound and your mind labels it insult, that is also perception. This process is conditioned by our past, our culture, our personal history. The same word can be perceived as a joke by one person and an insult by another. Perception is not an objective truth. It is a learned interpretation. The fourth aggregate is mental formations, or sankhara. This is perhaps the most complex. It includes all of our mental habits, our intentions, our thoughts, our biases, our prejudices, our desires, and our aversions. It is the momentum of the mind, the tendency to anger quickly, the habit of worrying, the pattern of judging others. These are all mental formations. They are not who we are. They are simply well-worn grooves in the mind, karmic patterns that propel us to think, speak, and act in certain ways, often unconsciously. The simmering resentment you feel after being slighted is a mental formation. The fifth and final aggregate is consciousness, or vijnana. This is the basic faculty of awareness, the knowing quality of the mind. It is not a continuous, singular I that is aware. Rather, it is a series of discrete moments of consciousness arising in dependence on the other aggregates. There is eye consciousness, ear consciousness, mind consciousness. It arises when there is an object, like a sight or a thought, and a sense organ. It is the light that illuminates the other processes, but it too arises and passes away with every single moment. So, when we say, "I am angry," what is actually happening? The unpleasant feeling arises. The perception labels the event an insult. The mental formations produce a cascade of resentful thoughts, and consciousness is aware of this whole process. There is no solid, separate me sitting behind it all, pulling the levers. There is only the process itself unfolding. The self is an event, not an entity. There is a famous and beautiful story that illustrates this with perfect clarity. Over 2,000 years ago, a Greek king named Milinda, a ruler in India known for his sharp intellect, sought out a renowned Buddhist sage named Nagasena. The king, confident in his logic, wanted to challenge the monk on this very idea of no self. He arrived and found Nagasena sitting peacefully. After exchanging greetings, the king went straight to the point. "Venerable sir," he asked, "what is your name? By what are you known?" Nagasena replied, "I am known as Nagasena, your majesty, but Nagasena is only a designation, a name in common use. For in the ultimate sense, there is no person, no permanent self to be found here." The king was delighted. He thought he had the monk trapped. "No person to be found?" he exclaimed to his retinue of soldiers. "Listen to this. If there is no person, then who is it that wears these robes and takes this food? Who lives? Who walks? Who meditates? If someone were to kill you, Nagasena, there would be no murder, for there is no person to be killed. Then, turning back to the sage, the king gestured to his own magnificent chariot standing nearby. "Venerable sir, did you walk here, or did you arrive in a chariot?" "I came on foot, your majesty," Nagasena replied. "But if you had come in a chariot," the king pressed, "what is the chariot? Is the pole the chariot?" "No, your majesty," said Nagasena. "Is the axle the chariot?" "No, your majesty." "Are the wheels, the frame, the reins, the yoke, the whip, the chariot?" With each question, Nagasena calmly answered, "No, your majesty." "Then is it all of these parts combined that are the chariot?" "No, your majesty." "Then, is there something else outside of these parts that is the chariot?" "No, your majesty." The king was triumphant. "Then, sir, you speak a falsehood. You lie. There is no chariot, and yet you stand before me, a revered monk. Where is this chariot you speak of?" At this, Nagasena, with a gentle calm, turned the question back on the king. "Your majesty, you say you are known as Melinda. But what is Melinda? Is your hair Melinda?" "No, venerable sir." "Are your nails, your teeth, your skin, your muscles, your bones Melinda?" "No, venerable sir." "Are your feelings, your perceptions, your thoughts Melinda?" "No, venerable sir." "Is it then all of these things combined that are Melinda?" "No, venerable sir." "Is there something else outside of these components that is Melinda?" "No, venerable sir." Now it was Nagasena who looked at the king with compassionate inquiry. "Then, your majesty, where is the Melinda to be found?" Just as the word chariot is a convenient name, a mere designation for a collection of parts arranged in a certain way, so too is Nagasena, or Melinda, simply a name we use for this temporary collection of body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. In ultimate reality, there is no solid, separate self to be found. The king sat in stunned silence, his intellectual pride shattered, replaced by a dawning sense of profound truth. He understood. This is the first lesson the mirror of the other offers us. The I that feels so wounded is a phantom. It is a story, a convention, a useful label, but not an ultimate reality. And the most liberating part of this realization is that it applies not only to us, but to the person we are interacting with. That colleague who insulted you is also not a monolithic, solid enemy. They are also a flowing river of these five processes. Their hurtful words arose from their own complex web of fleeting feelings, conditioned perceptions, and habitual mental formations. Perhaps they were driven by their own insecurity, their own fear, their own suffering. When you see this, the interaction is no longer a battle between two solid statues, good me and bad him. It becomes a meeting of two complex, flowing, and ultimately interdependent processes. The target for your anger dissolves. The weight of the personal offense becomes lighter, more transparent. When we begin to see through this illusion of a separate self, our entire world begins to shift. We realize that our suffering doesn't come from the arrows that others shoot at us, but from our deep-seated belief that there is a solid me here to be hit. By understanding the nature of the self, or rather the no-self, we take the first and most important step toward genuine freedom. But if this clinging to a false self is the deep root of our troubles, how exactly does it blossom into the thorny branches of suffering, dissatisfaction, and unease that we feel in our daily lives? Now that we have looked at the perceiver, we must look at the perception of pain itself. What is this universal experience of suffering that the Buddha identified as the core human problem? We have stood before the first mirror and seen that the solid, separate self we work so hard to protect is an illusion, a fluid process of thoughts, feelings, and sensations. This is a profound and perhaps unsettling realization. It's like discovering the king you've sworn to defend is merely a phantom. But if there is no solid me to be offended, then what is this experience of pain, this sting of injustice, this background hum of anxiety that we feel so acutely in our interactions with others? If the target isn't real, what is the arrow? To answer this, we must turn to the very heart of the Buddha's teaching, a framework so practical and direct it can be compared to a physician's diagnosis. It is known as the Four Noble Truths, and they are not articles of faith to be believed, but truths to be seen and understood for ourselves, especially within the laboratory of our relationships. Imagine you go to a wise and compassionate doctor because you feel unwell. The doctor's process is simple and methodical. First, they name the illness. They identify the symptoms and declare, there is a sickness. This is the first noble truth, the truth of suffering, or dukkha. The word dukkha is often translated as suffering, but its meaning is far more subtle and pervasive. It's not just the obvious pain of loss, betrayal, or a harsh word. That is indeed dukkha. But it's also the stress of holding on to happiness, the anxiety that a wonderful moment with a friend will end, which it always does. This is the dukkha of change. And finally, there is the most subtle form, the dukkha of conditioned existence itself, a fundamental, underlying unsatisfactoriness that comes from being a temporary assembly of changing parts in a world we cannot control. It is the vague restlessness we feel even when things are going well, the feeling that something is missing. In our relationships, dukkha is the gap between how things are and how we want them to be. We want approval, and we get criticism. We want connection, and we feel distance. We want permanence, and we get change. The first truth simply asks us to have the courage to look at this, to admit, without blame or judgment, that this dissatisfaction is a fundamental part of our human experience. After identifying the illness, the wise doctor then diagnoses its cause. They say, your sickness is not random. It has a specific origin. This is the second noble truth, the truth of the origin of suffering, samudaya. The Buddha identified the cause with a single, powerful word, tanha, which translates as thirst or craving. It is a deep, instinctual drive to satisfy the phantom self. This thirst takes three primary forms. First, there is the thirst for sense pleasures, the craving for agreeable sights, sounds, tastes, and in our relationships, the craving for praise, affection, and validation. When someone agrees with us, we feel a pleasant sensation, and the thirst immediately arises to have more of it. Second, there is the thirst for existence, the craving to be something, to have a solid and lasting identity. This is the ego's deep hunger to be seen as important, intelligent, successful, or loved. It is this thirst that makes us so exquisitely vulnerable to the opinions of others. And third, there's the thirst for non-existence, the craving to get rid of what is unpleasant. This is aversion. It is the desperate push against reality, the desire for the difficult colleague to change, for the painful feeling of anxiety to vanish, for the uncomfortable silence in a conversation to end. The second truth is radical. It states that our suffering does not come from the other person's action, but from our own internal thirst, our own clinging and pushing away. The insult is just a sound. Our thirst to be respected is what turns it into a poison. There is a story that illustrates these first two truths with heartbreaking beauty. A young woman named Kisa Gotami lived in a village and had a beloved infant son. One day, the child fell ill and died. Consumed by a grief so total she could not accept reality, she clutched the tiny, lifeless body to her chest and went from house to house, desperately searching for a medicine that could bring him back. Some people mocked her, others turned away in pity, but her frantic mind could not be calmed. Finally, a wise man saw her profound suffering and, instead of dismissing her, gave her a compassionate instruction. "I do not have the medicine you seek," he said, "but the Buddha does. Go to him." Kisa Gotami ran to the place where the Buddha was teaching and, laying her child at his feet, begged him for the miracle cure. The Buddha looked at her with immense compassion and said, "There is only one way to heal your grief. You must go back into the village and bring me a single mustard seed. But," he added, "it must come from a house where no one has ever died." Filled with a surge of hope, Kisa Gotami began her quest. At the first house, a grand mansion, she knocked and asked, "Can you spare a mustard seed for the Buddha's medicine?" "Of course," the woman at the door said kindly. As she was about to hand it over, Kisa Gotami remembered the condition. "Wait," she said. Has anyone in this house ever known death? The woman's face fell. My dear, she said softly, the living are few, but the dead are many. Just last year, I lost my husband. Saddened, Kisa Gautami went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was the same at every single door. One family had lost a parent. Another had lost a sibling. Another had lost a child, just like her. House by house, her frantic personal grief began to soften, transformed by the vast, shared ocean of human sorrow. She realized that the arrow of loss had not struck her alone. It is a fate that touches every single family, every single life. The Buddha had not sent her on a search for a magical seed, but on a journey to the heart of the first noble truth. Suffering is universal. As the sun began to set, she sat down by the side of the road, the body of her child still in her arms, and watched the village lights flicker on, one by one, only to be extinguished later in the night. And in that moment, she understood. Her attachment, her desperate craving for her son to be exempt from the universal law of change, was the true source of her torment. With this profound realization, she gently carried her son to the charnel ground and returned to the Buddha, no longer seeking a cure, but with a mind prepared for wisdom. Her journey leads us to the third noble truth, Nirodha, the truth of cessation. After diagnosing the illness and its cause, the doctor gives the hopeful prognosis, a cure is possible. You can be free from this sickness. This is the promise that by extinguishing the thirst, the craving, we can extinguish the suffering. Nirodha is not a state of nothingness. It is the sublime peace that arises when the fires of greed, aversion, and delusion are put out. In our relationships, it is the freedom to be fully present with another person without needing them to be a certain way for us to be okay. It is the ability to receive a compliment without clinging and to receive a criticism without collapsing. It is a state of inner resilience, a peace that comes from within, unshakable by the winds of praise and blame. Finally, having offered this hopeful prognosis, the doctor writes the prescription. This is the fourth noble truth, Magga, the truth of the path. The Buddha laid out a clear, practical, and gradual set of guidelines for walking the path from suffering to freedom, known as the Noble Eightfold Path. It is a complete training for the human being, encompassing wisdom, ethical conduct, and mental discipline. It begins, crucially, with right understanding seeing things as they truly are. This is exactly the journey we are on now, understanding the nature of the self, understanding the reality of dukkha, and understanding its cause in our own thirst. The path is not a mystery, it is a map, showing us how to cultivate the qualities that lead to the end of suffering, step by step, in our very own lives. So, the diagnosis is complete. We see that the unease we feel in our encounters is dukkha, a universal experience. We see that its cause is not the other person, but our own internal thirst. And we see that freedom is possible by following a clear and practical path. This framework transforms every interaction. The difficult person is no longer just a source of annoyance. They are a living demonstration of the first noble truth. Our own flash of anger is no longer just a regrettable reaction. It is a perfect opportunity to see the second noble truth in action. Every moment becomes a chance to practice. This relentless cycle of thirst, reaction, and consequence is not random. It is governed by a universal law of cause and effect, a law that puts the power of our future squarely in our own hands. To understand how we weave the fabric of our own reality, moment by moment, we must now turn to this profound law, the law of karma. We have seen that our inner world is often in a state of unease, a state of dukkha, and that this suffering is not caused by others, but by our own deep-seated thirst, our craving and aversion. This cycle of wanting and pushing away, of reaction and dissatisfaction, can feel like a prison, a relentless loop we are condemned to repeat in every difficult encounter. But this cycle is not random, nor is it a punishment from an external judge. It is governed by a universal law, a principle as fundamental and impersonal as gravity. This law is known as karma, and understanding it is the key to reclaiming our power, to transforming ourselves from victims of circumstance into the conscious creators of our lives. The word karma has drifted into the Western lexicon, carrying heavy baggage. We often think of it as fate, an unchangeable destiny written in the stars, or as a cosmic balancing of scales, where a good deed is instantly rewarded and a bad one is swiftly punished. But the Buddhist understanding of karma is far more subtle, practical, and empowering. It is not about fate, it is about freedom. The Buddha stated that karma, or kama, in the original Pali language, is satana, which means intention or volition. It is the intention behind the action. It is the moral and psychological quality of our choices, the energy we put out into the world through our thoughts, our words, and our deeds. Karma is not what happens to us. Karma is what we intentionally do and the results that flow from those doings. Think of it this way. Every intentional action is a seed. An action born from generosity, kindness, and understanding is a wholesome seed, like a seed from a healthy, life-giving fruit. An action born from greed, hatred, and ignorance is an unwholesome seed, like a seed from a thorny, poisonous weed. We are planting these seeds with every thought, every word, and every deed all day long. The results of these actions, the fruits, are known as vipaka. And just like in agriculture, these seeds do not always sprout immediately. Some seeds ripen in this life, some in the next. Some fruits are small, others are large. This explains the seeming injustices of the world, why a cruel person might prosper for a time, or a kind person might face hardship. They are simply experiencing the ripening of different seeds from different times. The law is not one of instant retribution, but of eventual, natural consequence. Let us bring this back into the meeting room. When your colleague speaks a dismissive word, from a karmic perspective, you can see it in a new light. That experience, arriving in your consciousness, is a vipaka, a fruit that is ripening. It is the result of past causes. Perhaps in a moment of carelessness last week, or last year, or in a time beyond memory, you yourself planted a seed of dismissiveness. You spoke a sharp word. You ignored someone's contribution. And today, that seed has ripened into the fruit you are now tasting. This viewpoint is not meant to induce guilt or blame. Its purpose is the exact opposite. It is to release us from the prison of victimhood. Instead of thinking, why is this happening to me? We can begin to contemplate, what is this experience a result of? How have my own past actions co-created this moment? It dissolves the feeling of randomness and replaces it with a sense of profound interconnectedness and responsibility. But this backward-looking glance is only half of the equation, and it is the less important half. The real power of understanding karma lies in looking at the present moment, for the present moment is where all of our power resides. The external event, the other person's word or action, is the ripening fruit of the past. We cannot change it. It has arrived. But our response to it, right here, right now, is the new seed we are planting for our future. This is the moment of choice. This is the moment of freedom. In that instant, after the dismissive comment, you stand at a crossroads. One path is the familiar, well-trodden road of habitual reaction. Feeling the sting of the insult, you allow the unwholesome seed of aversion to take root. Your mind begins to water it with resentful thoughts. Who does he think he is? I'll show him. I'll never help him with the project again. Your words, perhaps later in the day, become sharp and defensive. Your actions become cold and withdrawn. With every one of these intentional reactions, you are planting more thorny seeds of anger, division, and resentment in the field of your own consciousness. And the inevitable harvest of those seeds will be more conflict, more isolation, and more suffering. You are perpetuating the cycle, but there is another path. It is less traveled, and it requires a moment of conscious pause. In that pause, you feel the sting. You acknowledge the unpleasant feeling, but you choose not to water the seed of aversion. You recognize this is suffering, this is dukkha. You see the arising of your own thirst to be seen and respected. And in that space of mindfulness, you can make a different choice. You can plant a different kind of seed. Perhaps the seed is patience, a simple act of breathing and not reacting. Perhaps it is a seed of understanding, thinking, he must be having a difficult day. His reaction is likely not about me, but about his own inner state. Perhaps it is even a seed of silent compassion, wishing for him to be free from the suffering that causes him to act in such a way. By choosing to plant these wholesome seeds of patience, understanding, and compassion, you are actively creating the causes for your own future peace. You are ensuring that your future harvest will be one of greater harmony, connection, and well-being. You are breaking the cycle. This entire process can be understood through the simple and beautiful analogy of a farmer and their field. Imagine your life, your consciousness, is a field of earth. The ripening fruits of your past karma are the conditions of the field you inherit today. It might be fertile soil, or it might be filled with rocks, stumps, and thorny weeds left over from previous seasons. The difficult colleague, the traffic jam, the unexpected bildies are the rocks and stumps. Now, the unskilled farmer spends all day cursing the rocks. He kicks them. He complains about the poor quality of his field. He gives up, and in his anger, he scatters more weed seeds everywhere. His future harvest will be just as miserable as his present one. But the wise farmer, the practitioner of conscious living, does something different. She wakes up in the morning and acknowledges the condition of the field exactly as it is. She sees the rocks, the stumps, the weeds. She doesn't waste energy complaining about them or wishing them away. She accepts them as the starting point for her day's work. Then, with great intention, she begins to plant. She patiently works around the rocks. She gently removes the weeds she can, and most importantly, she sows good seeds. She plants seeds of corn, beans, and nourishing vegetables. She plants seeds of beautiful, fragrant flowers. Day after day, she continues this work. Over time, what will be the character of her field? It will be defined not by the rocks that were there in the beginning, but by the nourishing and beautiful harvest that her own intentional actions have created. The quality of the field is transformed by the quality of her present moment choices. We are all farmers of our own lives. Karma is the law of our harvest. What seeds will you choose to plant today? What future do you want to reap? The power is not in the past. It is in the quality of your intention right now. And if intention is the seed, we must ask, where does it come from? It arises from the mind. The mind is the soil, the architect of our actions, the source of our intentions. Therefore, to truly become a conscious farmer of our lives, we must understand the nature of the soil itself. We must turn our attention inward to the architect of our reality, the mind. We have arrived at a pivotal understanding. Our lives are not a random series of events, but are shaped by the universal law of cause and effect, the law of karma. We have seen that the seeds of our future are not planted by others, but by the quality of our own intentions. This realization is liberating, for it places the pen of our life story back into our own hands. But this raises a deeper, more immediate question. From where do these intentions arise? Where is the source of the actions that create our world? The Buddha's answer to this is unequivocal and revolutionary. It is the very first verse of the Dhammapada, one of the most cherished texts of this tradition. Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind, wrought. If with an impure mind a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. If with a pure mind a person speaks or acts, happiness follows him like his never-departing shadow. This is the key. The architect of our reality, the soil in which all karmic seeds are planted, is the mind. We do not experience the world as it is. We experience a version of the world that has been constructed, filtered, and projected by our own consciousness. We believe we are looking out at the world through a clear glass window, but in reality, each of us is looking through a unique and complex stained glass window colored by the tints of our past experiences, our beliefs, our fears, our hopes, and our present mood. If on a particular day our window is stained with the gray of sadness, the entire world will appear bleak and joyless. If it is colored with the red of anger, the world will seem hostile and filled with provocation. If it is tinted with the blue of anxiety, the world will look like a minefield of potential threats. The world outside the window has not changed, but our experience of it is entirely different. Consider a simple scenario. Two people are invited to the same social gathering. The room, the music, the people are identical for both. The first person, whose mind is conditioned by insecurity and social anxiety, enters the room and their mind immediately begins its work. Their stained glass window is one of judgment. They see people talking in a corner and their mind projects the story. They are laughing at me. They see someone glance at them and their mind whispers, they can see how nervous I am. For this person, the party is a trial, an ordeal to be survived. The second person, whose mind is conditioned by confidence and friendliness, enters the same room. Their window is stained with the gold of openness. They see the group in the corner and think, they look like they're having fun. Maybe I'll go say hello. They see the same glance and their mind interprets it as a friendly sign of welcome. For this person, the party is a joy, an opportunity for connection. The objective reality of the room is secondary. The primary reality, the one we actually live in, is the one created by the mind. We don't react to events, we react to our interpretations of events. When your colleague makes that dismissive comment, what are you truly reacting to? You are not reacting to the simple vibration of sound waves in the air. Between those sound waves hitting your eardrum and your feeling of anger, an incredibly complex and near instantaneous process takes place. Your mind acts as a supercomputer, instantly cross-referencing that sound with its vast database of memories, beliefs, and insecurities. It pulls up the file on how I need to be seen as intelligent. It accesses the history of your relationship with this specific colleague. It connects the feeling to past moments of being dismissed. In a microsecond, it weaves all this together and produces a verdict, a story. This is a personal attack. This is a threat to my status and self-worth. You are not reacting to the colleague. You are reacting to your mind's story about the colleague. The suffering is not in the comment. It is in the interpretation. This truth is beautifully and unforgettably captured in a classic Zen story about two monks, one senior and one junior, who were traveling together. They followed a strict monastic code, which included a vow never to touch a woman. After walking for many hours, they came to a river that had been swollen by heavy rains. The current was strong, and on the bank stood a young woman in fine clothes, clearly distressed and unable to cross without ruining her dress and risking being swept away. The junior monk, rigid in his observance, immediately looked away, thinking about the rule. He saw the situation as a test of his purity. The senior monk, however, simply walked up to the woman. Without a word, he lifted her in his arms, carried her across the turbulent, muddy water, and gently set her down on the other side. She bowed in gratitude, and he bowed in return, and then he continued on his journey. The junior monk, after hastily crossing the river himself, was in a state of shock and inner turmoil. He was aghast. He couldn't believe what he had seen. His master, a man he revered, had flagrantly broken a sacred vow. For the next several hours, the two monks walked in silence, but it was not a peaceful silence for the younger one. His mind was a raging storm. He replayed the scene over and over. The image of his master holding the woman was burned into his consciousness. He debated with himself. He judged. He condemned. He was carrying the weight of this event with every step, and it grew heavier and heavier. The woman was long gone, but for the junior monk, she was still right there, being carried in his mind. Finally, as they neared their destination for the night, he could bear it no longer. He burst out, his voice trembling with indignation. "Brother, how could you do that? We are monks. We are forbidden to touch a woman, let alone carry one in our arms like that. How could you violate our vows?" The senior monk stopped, looked at his young companion with genuine puzzlement, and then a gentle smile touched his lips. He replied softly, "Brother, I left that woman by the riverbank hours ago. Why are you still carrying her? This story illuminates our predicament perfectly. The external event, the crossing of the river, was finished in moments. It was neutral. For the senior monk, whose mind was clear and present, the act was a simple, compassionate response to a need, and once it was done, it was done. His mind was free, but the junior monk's mind clung to the event, weaving a heavy, elaborate story of rule-breaking, sin, and judgment. He was not being burdened by the woman or by his master's action. He was being crushed under the weight of his own mind. This is the great turning point in our practice. When we truly see this, we realize that freedom is not about controlling the world, controlling other people, or avoiding difficult situations. It is about learning to master our own minds. It is about seeing our interpretations not as objective reality, but as mental habits, stories that we have the power to question and ultimately to let go of. This doesn't mean we become passive or that we pretend hurtful things don't hurt. It means we stop adding a second layer of suffering to our story about the hurt on top of the initial pain. We stop carrying the woman long after we have left the river. This realization shifts us from the powerless position of a victim, constantly being battered by the world, to the empowered position of a student of our own consciousness. The world is no longer our enemy, it becomes our classroom. And the only subject is the nature of our own mind. But if the mind is this powerful architect, constantly building our reality without our conscious permission, how do we begin to change its blueprints? How do we become the master of this inner house instead of its unwitting prisoner? To do this, we need to develop a new skill, not a skill of changing our thoughts or suppressing our feelings, but a skill of simply watching them. We need to learn to sit quietly in the rooms of our own mind and observe the architect at work without judgment. This skill, this gentle, steady attention, is called mindfulness. We have arrived at a profound and perhaps unsettling truth. Our reality is not something that happens to us, but something that is actively constructed from moment to moment by our own mind. The mind is the architect, the storyteller, the stained glass window through which we experience everything. This is the source of our bondage, but it is also the key to our liberation. For if the house of our experience is built by our mind, then we must get to know the architect. We must learn to watch it at work. We must become familiar with its habits, its patterns, and its blueprints. This intimate, non-judgmental observation is the essence of a practice known as mindfulness. The Pali word is sati, and it is the heartwood of this entire path of awakening. Mindfulness is a word that, like karma, has become commonplace, and its meaning is often diluted. It is frequently mistaken for simply relaxing, thinking positive thoughts, or trying to empty the mind. It is none of these things. In fact, its power lies in its simplicity and its radical commitment to the truth of the present moment. A beautiful, practical definition is this: mindfulness is paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. Let us look at these three components, for they are the pillars of this transformative practice. First, we pay attention on purpose. This is not the scattered, passive attention of scrolling through a phone or daydreaming. It is an intentional act. We are consciously choosing to direct the flashlight of our awareness onto a chosen object, to gather our scattered mind and bring it to one point. It is an act of will, a decision to show up for our own life. Second, we pay attention in the present moment. Our minds are magnificent time-traveling machines. They spend vast amounts of energy ruminating on the pastry-playing conversations, nursing old grievances, clinging to fated triumphs or rehearsing for the future planning, worrying, fantasizing. The one place the mind rarely wants to be is right here, right now. Yet, the present moment is the only place where life is actually happening. It is the only place where we can feel, learn, grow, and make a new choice. Mindfulness is the practice of gently but firmly escorting our mind back from its travels in time to the reality of the now. Third, and this is the most crucial and often the most difficult part, we pay attention non-judgmentally. This means we observe our inner world with a quality of unconditional, friendly acceptance. When we turn our attention inward, we will not always find peace and light. We will find the full spectrum of the human experience: anger, jealousy, fear, boredom, restlessness, as well as joy and calm. The habitual reaction is to judge these experiences. We think, I shouldn't be feeling angry, or worrying is so unproductive, or I'm a bad person for having this thought. This judgment is a second arrow, as the Buddha called it. The first arrow is the unpleasant feeling itself. The second arrow, which we shoot into ourselves, is our condemnation of the feeling. Mindfulness is the practice of putting down the second arrow. It is allowing ourselves to feel what we feel, to think what we think, without adding a layer of self-criticism. We adopt the attitude of a curious, compassionate scientist observing a natural phenomenon. Ah, here is anger. How interesting. What does it feel like in my body? There is heat in my face, a tightness in my chest. We are not the anger. We are the awareness that is aware of the anger. This practice creates a profound shift in our relationship with ourselves and with others. It creates a space. The great psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." For most of us, that space is non-existent. The stimulus, the colleague's dismissive word arrives, and the response anger, defensiveness is instantaneous and automatic. We are puppets, pulled by the strings of our conditioning. Mindfulness is the act of creating and widening that sacred space. The stimulus arrives. Because we have been training our attention, a moment of awareness arises. Pause. In that pause, we see the habitual reaction begin to form. We feel the flush of anger, the urge to lash out. But because we see it, we are no longer helplessly identified with it. We are not the storm. We are the sky watching the storm cloud gather. And in that space, we have a choice. We can choose to let the cloud pass. We can choose to breathe. We can choose to respond from a place of wisdom and calm, rather than from the blind reactivity of our wounded ego. We shift from being a reactor to a responder. To cultivate this skill, we begin with a simple, formal practice. We find a quiet place to sit for just a few minutes each day. We close our eyes, and we bring our purposeful attention to the physical sensation of the breath. Perhaps we feel the cool air entering the nostrils and the warm air leaving, or we feel the gentle rise and fall of the abdomen. The breath is our anchor to the present moment. It is always here, always now. And then we watch. Inevitably, within a few seconds, the mind will wander. A thought will arise, a memory, a plan. This is not a failure. This is the nature of the mind. The practice is in that moment when we realize we have wandered. That moment of realizing is a moment of mindfulness. And in that moment, without any judgment or frustration, we gently, kindly, like guiding a lost puppy, escort our attention back to the anchor of the breath. Again and again and again. Every time we do this, we are strengthening our mindfulness muscle. We are learning to be the sky, not the cloud. As we practice this formally, we begin to bring it into the chaos of our daily lives. The true meditation hall is the meeting room, the family dinner, the traffic jam. When that difficult encounter happens, the mindfulness muscle we have been training kicks in. The stimulus arrives, and we feel that familiar clenching in the stomach, that heat in the chest. But now, instead of being immediately swept away by the story in our head, a new voice whispers, "Ah, this is it. This is the feeling of anger in the body." We can bring our attention directly to the raw physical sensations. We explore them with curiosity. Where does it start? Where does it end? Is it solid or is it vibrating? By relating to our emotions as pure physical energy in the body, they begin to lose their power. The story of "he wronged me" dissolves, and what is left is just a wave of energy, rising and passing away, like all things. This is the power of the silent watcher. It does not fight with reality. It does not try to suppress feelings or force thoughts to stop. It simply illuminates what is already here. It brings the light of gentle, non-judgmental awareness to our inner world, and in that light, the tangled knots of our reactivity begin to loosen on their own. We learn that we are bigger than our anger, bigger than our fear, bigger than our sadness. We are the vast, open space of awareness in which all of these experiences can arise and pass away without leaving a stain. This is the beginning of true inner freedom, but mindfulness, as profound as it is only the first step. It is the tool that creates the clearing in the dense forest of our mind. It stops us from blindly stumbling around, from endlessly repeating our conditioned reactions. But it does not, by itself, tell us what to plant in that new clearing. Once we have created this space through awareness, our path invites us to consciously cultivate the most beautiful and healing qualities within it. We must learn not only to see our own suffering with clarity, but to see the suffering in others, and to respond not just with non-judgment, but with an open and active heart. Our next step is to look into the mirror held up by the most difficult people in our lives and see not a monster, but a teacher, an opportunity to cultivate patience and transform the poison of anger into the medicine of compassion. With the tool of mindfulness, we have created a clearing in the tangled forest of our mind. We have learned to pause, to watch the arising of our habitual reactions without being immediately swept away. Now, we are ready to use this newfound space to approach one of the most powerful and destructive forces in our inner world, the raw, hot energy of anger. Our guide on this next stage of the journey will be an unlikely figure, one we normally spend our lives trying to avoid, to complain about, and to banish from our thoughts. This guide is the difficult person. It is the abrasive colleague, the critical family member, the frustrating neighbor. In the wisdom of this path, these people are not obstacles to our peace. They are our most precious, most challenging, and most effective teachers. They are the mirror in which we can see the workings of our own anger with perfect clarity. We are conditioned to believe that peace is a fragile state that is achieved only when everyone around us behaves exactly as we wish. When someone violates our unspoken rules for the world, when they are rude, inconsiderate, or unfairer, peace is shattered, and we believe they are the thief who stole it. This path suggests a radical reversal of that view. The difficult person does not create our anger. They merely reveal the anger that is already latent within us. They are like a physician who presses on a tender spot on our body. The pain does not come from the finger, it comes from the wound that is already there. The difficult person's service is to show us exactly where our inner wounds are, where our attachments lie, where our ego is most fragile. When you feel that flash of anger in response to someone's words, it is a sign. It is a bell of mindfulness, ringing to alert you to an unmet expectation. You are angry because you believe things should be different. People should drive more carefully. Colleagues should be more respectful. Your partner should understand your needs without you having to state them. These shoulds are the rigid, invisible bars of our own self-created prison. The difficult person, in their imperfection, walks directly into these bars, and the loud clang of our anger reveals the prison's existence. Without them, we might never even know we were living in it. They are holding up a mirror, and in it we see not their flaws, but our own rigid demands upon the world. They show us where we are clinging, where our peace is conditional, where our freedom is incomplete. Seeing this transforms the difficult person from an adversary into an opportunity. They become our personal trainer for the cultivation of one of the most vital spiritual muscles, patience, or shanti in Sanskrit. Patience, in this context, is not a weak or passive state of gritting our teeth and enduring. It is an active, courageous, and deeply wise quality of the heart. It is the strength to remain steady in the face of provocation. And just as a weightlifter cannot build muscle without the resistance of heavy weights, we cannot cultivate patience without the resistance of difficult people. They provide the necessary friction for our spiritual growth. To wish for a life free of all annoying people is to wish for a gym with no weights. It is to wish for an ocean with no waves. When we understand this, our perspective shifts entirely. The frustrating encounter is no longer a disruption to our practice. The frustrating encounter is the practice. We can even feel a sense of gratitude for these teachers, for they are offering us, free of charge, the exact curriculum we need to develop a strong and peaceful heart. To motivate us in this practice, it is wise to analyze the nature of anger itself. The Buddha offered a powerful and visceral metaphor. He said that holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else, who gets burned. While we are searching for our target, planning our throw, and fuming with indignation, the searing coal is held firmly in our own hand. The anger we feel floods our own body with stress hormones. It raises our own blood pressure. It clouds our own mind with poison. The other person may be miles away, completely unaware of our turmoil, sleeping peacefully in their bed. But we, the one holding the coal, are guaranteed to suffer. The practice of patience, then, is primarily an act of profound self-compassion. It is the wisdom to realize that we are burning ourselves and to make the conscious choice to drop the coal. It is not about letting the other person get away with it. It is about refusing to poison ourselves on their behalf. It is the choice to protect our own peace above the fleeting, bitter satisfaction of being right. There is a timeless story that demonstrates this principle in action. One day, a man of the Brahmin caste, a high-ranking religious scholar, heard that many of his family members had abandoned their traditional ways to follow the teachings of the Buddha. He became enraged, viewing the Buddha as a charlatan who was corrupting his community. He stormed to the place where the Buddha was teaching, pushed his way to the front, and began to unleash a torrent of the most vile and vicious insults he could muster. He insulted the Buddha's character, his family, his teachings, his appearance. He spat and cursed, his face red with fury. The Buddha did not react. He did not defend himself. He did not argue. He simply sat in a state of profound, unshakable peace and listened with quiet, compassionate attention as if he were listening to the sound of the wind in the trees. He let the man's rage flow over him without absorbing any of it. Finally, the Brahmin exhausted himself. He ran out of insults, his energy spent, and he stood panting in the sudden silence, confused by the Buddha's complete lack of reaction. After a moment, the Buddha spoke, his voice calm and gentle. "My friend," he said, "may I ask you a question?" The man, taken aback, simply nodded. If you prepare a beautiful gift and you go to give it to someone, but that person refuses to accept your gift, to whom does the gift then belong? The Brahmin thought for a moment and replied, "Well, if they don't accept it, then it still belongs to me." The Buddha smiled softly and said, "Exactly so. Today, my friend, you came and offered me the gift of your anger and your insults. I have chosen not to accept it." With that simple statement, the entire dynamic was transformed. The anger, the poison, the negativity was returned to its source. The Buddha demonstrated that we have a choice. We do not have to accept the gifts of anger, hatred, and negativity that others try to hand us. We can politely refuse delivery. We are not a public dumping ground for other people's suffering. This is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of profound inner strength and wisdom. It is the ultimate expression of dropping the hot coal. So the next time you encounter one of your difficult teachers and you feel that familiar heat rising, remember this. See them as a mirror showing you where you are attached. See them as your personal trainer, offering you a perfect opportunity to practice patience. And see their anger as a hot coal they are trying to hand you. See it as a gift you have every right to refuse. This practice alone, if undertaken with sincerity, can bring an immense sense of freedom and peace into your life. But aversion and anger are only one side of the coin of our discontent. The other, more subtle and seductive side, is that of wanting, craving, and desire. So now, we must turn our gaze to another powerful mirror, the one held up by the person who doesn't anger us, but who fills us with the quiet, gnawing pain of envy. What lesson does the person we secretly wish we could be teach us about the nature of our own heart? Having looked into the fiery mirror of anger, we have seen how the difficult person can be a teacher of patience, revealing our hidden expectations and the raw wounds of our ego. Now, we turn from the hot, explosive emotion of aversion to its cooler, quieter, but equally painful sibling, desire. We move from the mirror that enrages us to the one that makes us feel small, the mirror held up by the person we envy. Envy is a universal human suffering. a quiet poison that we rarely admit to others, or even to ourselves. It is the sinking feeling in the stomach when a colleague gets the promotion we wanted, the pang of longing when we see pictures of a friend's seemingly perfect family vacation, the subtle resentment towards someone who possesses the talent, beauty, or wealth we feel we lack. It is a pain born from the toxic marriage of comparison and desire. Like anger, envy is not a moral failing to be condemned. It is a symptom to be understood. It is another manifestation of tanha, the thirst that the Buddha identified as the root of suffering. While anger is the thirst for the unpleasant to go away, envy is the thirst for the pleasant to be ours. The person we envy is a mirror, but instead of reflecting our anger, they reflect our perceived sense of lack. Their success does not cause our pain, it simply illuminates our pre-existing feeling of failure. Their happiness does not diminish our own, it highlights the places where we believe our own happiness is deficient. The mirror of envy shows us, with painful clarity, all the stories we tell ourselves about what we need to be happy. If only I had that job, then I would feel secure. If only I had a relationship like theirs, then I would not be lonely. If only I had their creative talent, then I would feel worthy. The person we envy becomes the living embodiment of the happiness we believe is outside of us. In our habitual state, this feeling festers. It can curdle into resentment, judgment, and a secret wish for the other person to fail. It is a deeply isolating and painful state of mind. But with the tool of mindfulness, we can transform this poison into a medicine. We can learn to use envy as a compass, a diagnostic tool for our own heart. The practice begins with acknowledging the feeling without the second arrow of judgment. When the feeling of envy arises, we simply note it with kindness. Ah, this is envy. This is what it feels like. We allow the feeling to be there, creating a space around it. In that space, we can begin a gentle inquiry. We can ask ourselves with genuine curiosity, what is this feeling really pointing to? Let's say we envy a friend's financial success. The surface level desire is for money. But if we look deeper, is it truly the money we want? Or is it the feeling of security, freedom, and ease that we believe the money provides? Perhaps what we truly crave is an end to our own anxiety about the future. Or perhaps we envy someone's vibrant social life. Is it their specific friends or parties we want? Or is it the deeper human need for connection, belonging, and an end to our own loneliness? This investigation is crucial. It helps us untangle the object of our envy from the underlying need it represents. When we see our true deeper need, we are freed from being fixated on what the other person has. We can then ask a much more skillful question: what are some wise and wholesome ways that I can cultivate a sense of security or a feeling of connection in my own life right now with the resources I already have? This shifts us from a state of passive, resentful, wanting into a state of active, empowered cultivation. This inquiry is powerful, but the ultimate antidote to the poison of envy is the deliberate cultivation of its direct opposite, mudita, or sympathetic joy. Mudita is one of the four sublime states of heart, alongside loving kindness, compassion, and equanimity. It is the genuine, wholehearted joy in the happiness, success, and good fortune of others. If envy is rooted in a mindset of scarcity, the belief that there is a limited amount of happiness in the world and that someone else's portion diminishes my own than mudita is rooted in a mindset of radical abundance. It is the understanding that joy is not a zero-sum game. Another's success does not subtract from my potential. It simply adds more light to the world, a light that I too can bask in. To practice mudita feels, at first, completely unnatural. It runs contrary to the ego's deep-seated habits of comparison and competition. But like any muscle, it can be strengthened. We can begin in meditation, bringing to mind a friend or someone we admire. We can visualize their success, their happiness, their good fortune. Then, instead of allowing the mind to slip into the familiar groove of comparison, we consciously generate a different thought. May your happiness and success continue. May it grow. I am so happy for you. We try to feel the warmth of that sentiment in our heart. It may feel artificial at first, but with repetition, a genuine shift begins to occur. The benefit of this practice is immense, and it is ultimately an act of enlightened self-interest. Envy is a state of suffering. Mudita is a state of joy. By learning to celebrate the happiness of others, we dramatically increase our own opportunities for happiness. If we are only happy when good things happen to us, our chances for joy are quite limited. But if we can be happy when good things happen to our friends, our family, our colleagues, and even strangers, our opportunities for joy become virtually limitless. We are tapping into the vast, shared reservoir of human flourishing. There is an old story that speaks to this. A man lived in a small house, and from his kitchen window, he had a perfect view of his neighbor's garden. He became obsessed with it. Every morning, he would look out and see that his neighbor's grass seemed greener, his flowers more vibrant, his fruit trees more laden. This constant comparison filled him with a sense of inadequacy and resentment. His own garden, which he had once enjoyed, now seemed dull and pathetic. His days were clouded by this feeling of lack. One afternoon, the neighbor saw him staring out the window and with a friendly wave invited him over for a cup of tea. Reluctantly, the man agreed. As he walked through his neighbor's garden, he was surprised to see that, up close, it had plenty of imperfections. There were weeds in the flower beds, a patch of dry grass behind a bush, and aphids on some of the roses. It was beautiful, yes, but it wasn't the flawless paradise he had constructed in his mind. Then, as he sat on his neighbor's porch drinking tea, he looked back across the fence at his own garden. From this new vantage point, with the afternoon sun warming its colors, he saw it in a way he hadn't before. He saw the unique charm of his crooked rosebush, the sweet abundance of his humble vegetable patch, the way the light danced on the leaves of the tree he had planted as a child. A wave of warmth and appreciation washed over him. He realized the problem had never been the gardens themselves. The problem was his perspective. He had been so busy looking outward, comparing and craving, that he had failed to see and nurture the beauty that was already in his own care. The person we envy is our neighbor's gardener. They invite us to stop staring across the fence of comparison and to turn our attention back to our own plot of land. They teach us to investigate what our heart truly longs for and to cultivate it with our own hands. They offer us the opportunity to practice mudita, to transform the contracting pain of envy into the expansive warmth of shared joy. We have learned from the stranger who angers us and the rival who inspires our envy. But the most powerful lessons, the ones that reveal our deepest and most tenacious attachments, often come from those we hold most dear. We must now turn the mirror towards the people we love and examine the subtle and often painful line between pure, unconditional love and the suffering born from the clinging of attachment. We have stood before the mirror of the person who enrages us and learned the lessons of patience. We have gazed into the mirror of the person we envy and found the antidote of sympathetic joy. Now, we must turn to the most powerful, most intimate, and most challenging mirror of all. This is the mirror held up to us by those we love the most: our partners, our children, our parents, our dearest friends. It is in the fertile ground of these cherished relationships that the line between light and shadow becomes most blurred, where the beautiful flower of love can become entangled with the thorny, strangling vine of attachment. To find true peace in our connections with others, we must learn to distinguish one from the other. In our ordinary language, we use the word love to cover a vast territory of emotions. But from a spiritual perspective, it is crucial to differentiate between true, unconditional love and its convincing impersonator, clinging, or what in Buddhist thought is called upadana. True love is an expansive, outward-flowing energy. Its fundamental wish is for the happiness and freedom of the other. It is the sentiment of a gardener who tends to a flower, providing it with water, soil, and sunlight, not so the flower will praise the gardener, but so the flower itself can reach its fullest, most beautiful potential. True love is spacious. It trusts. It celebrates the autonomy of the other being. Its core question is, how can I contribute to your well-being? Attachment, on the other hand, is a contracting, inward pulling energy. Its fundamental wish is for the other person to be a source of my happiness, my security, my comfort. It is rooted not in generosity, but in a sense of inner lack. We see the other person as the solution to our loneliness, the validation for our fragile ego, the anchor in the storm of our anxiety. Attachment is filled with fear. The fear of loss, the fear of abandonment, the fear of not being enough. It seeks to control, to possess, to manage the other person in order to soothe these fears. Its core question is, how can you make me feel whole? Love is an open hand, offering warmth and allowing the butterfly of the other's spirit to rest and fly away as it pleases. Attachment is a clenched fist, trying to capture and own the butterfly, a desperate grasp that inevitably crushes the very thing it desires. Our closest relationships are the primary laboratory where this clinging is revealed. In a romantic partnership, it manifests as jealousy, the constant need for reassurance, and the subtle or overt attempts to control the other's friendships, time, or behavior. We mistake this possessiveness for the intensity of our love, but it is actually the intensity of our fear. For a parent, attachment can disguise itself as profound care. It is the desire for our child to follow a specific career path we have chosen, to adopt our beliefs, to marry a certain type of person not because it is their own authentic path, but because it fulfills our own unrealized dreams or makes us feel successful as a parent. We mistake our ambition for their happiness. We confuse our needs with theirs. With our friends, it can be a subtle resentment when they form other deep connections, a feeling that we are being replaced, a feeling that stems from the belief that their role is to fill a void within us. In all these cases, our loved one becomes a mirror, reflecting our own deepest insecurities. They mirror our fear of being alone. They mirror our desperate resistance to the one, inescapable truth of existence, impermanence, or anicca. The deepest root of our clinging is the denial of this universal law. We want the people we love and the happiness we derive from them to be permanent, stable, and unchanging. We want to build a fortress of love against the tides of time and change. But all things are in flux. Our bodies are changing, our minds are changing, and the people we love are changing. Relationships, if they are alive, are not static monuments. They are flowing, evolving rivers. To cling is to try and hold the water of a river in our fist. It is a futile, exhausting, and painful struggle against reality. To love with freedom is to love the river as it flows. It is to cherish the connection in this present moment with a full and open heart, while simultaneously honoring the truth that this moment will pass and things will change. It is to love the person for who they are right now and to give them the space to become who they are meant to be tomorrow, even if that person is different from the one we know today. This is one of the highest and most courageous forms of love. There is a simple story that captures the heart of this lesson. A woman living alone in a small cottage found a wild songbird with a broken wing. She tenderly brought it inside, nursed it back to health, and grew to love the creature dearly. Its song filled her quiet house with joy. When its wing was healed, she could not bear the thought of it leaving. She told herself it was because she loved it so much and wanted to protect it from the dangers of the world. So, she bought a beautiful, ornate cage and placed the bird inside. She fed it the finest seeds and fresh water every day. At first the bird sang, but its song was tinged with a note of sadness. As the weeks went on, its feathers began to lose their vibrant sheen, and it grew listless. It would sit silently on its perch for hours, staring out the window at the sky. Eventually, its beautiful song ceased altogether. The woman's heart broke. In her effort to possess the source of her happiness, she had inadvertently destroyed the very quality she cherished. She had fallen in love with the spirit of a wild, free creature, and she had tried to turn it into an object, a possession. The song she loved was the song of freedom, not the song of captivity. With tears streaming down her face, she understood her mistake. Her actions had not been born from pure love for the bird, but from a selfish fear of her own impending loneliness when it was gone. With trembling hands, she carried the cage outside and opened the little door. The bird, hesitant at first, hopped to the opening. It tested its wings, and then, with a joyful burst of energy, it launched into the air. It circled the woman's head once, as if in gratitude, and then soared high into the blue sky, letting out the most beautiful, triumphant song she had ever heard. The woman watched until it was just a speck in the distance. Her house felt quiet again, but her heart was full. She knew she might never see the bird up close again, but she had given it the gift of its own life, its own sky, and she realized that its joy was now her joy. This was true love. It was not in the holding on, but in the letting go. Our relationships offer us this same choice every single day. We can choose the gilded cage of attachment, a relationship built on fear, control, and neediness, which ultimately stifles both people. Or we can choose the vast open sky of love, a connection built on freedom, trust, and the genuine celebration of each other's true nature. This is the profound lesson mirrored in the eyes of those we love. We have now looked into the mirrors of anger, envy, and attachment. We have seen how our own inner state of being colors every single one of our interactions. But seeing is only the first step. To truly transform these encounters, we need to learn practical skills, tools that can build bridges of understanding where there were once walls of conflict. The foundation of all skillful communication, the first and most important bridge we must build, is the sacred art of listening. We have journeyed inward, holding up the mirrors of anger, envy, and attachment to illuminate the inner workings of our mind. We have seen that the source of our conflict and dissatisfaction in relationships is not the other person, but our own internal states of craving and aversion. This seeing, this understanding, is the foundation for freedom. But now, we must learn how to bring this freedom into the world. We must learn how to act, how to communicate from this newfound place of wisdom. The entire spiritual path can be seen as a training to close the gap between our understanding and our actual behavior. This is where we move from insight to skill. And the first most fundamental skill in transforming our relationships is the profound and radical art of communication, which begins not with speaking, but with listening. In our culture, we think of listening as a passive activity, a mere waiting for our turn to speak. Our minds are busy, formulating a rebuttal, preparing a defense, searching for a similar story of our own to share, or diagnosing the other person's problem and rushing to offer a solution. This is not listening, this is reloading. True, deep listening, what the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh calls compassionate listening, is something else entirely. It is a profound offering, a form of meditation where the object of our attention is another human being. Its sole purpose is not to win, not to be right, not even to understand in an intellectual sense, but simply to offer the other person a space where they can be heard, where they can feel safe enough to empty their heart. Its only aim is to help the other person suffer less. To practice compassionate listening, we must first learn to silence the constant chatter of our own inner narrator. We consciously set aside our own judgments, our own stories, our own needs. We make a silent vow to be fully present for this person for this period of time. We listen with our whole being. We listen with our ears to the words they are saying. We listen with our eyes to the language of their body, the tension in their shoulders, the downcast gaze, the nervous fidgeting of their hands. And most importantly, we listen with our heart for the feelings that lie beneath the surface of the words. We listen for what is not being said. Often, the words are just the tip of the iceberg. A person expressing anger may, underneath, be communicating a deep hurt or a profound fear. A person boasting with arrogance may be silently screaming their insecurity. A person expressing cynicism may be trying to protect a tender, wounded hope. The compassionate listener hears the suffering behind the unskillful speech. They do not react to the angry words. They respond to the pain that is giving them birth. When we offer this quality of listening to another, a small miracle occurs. Without our saying a word, the other person begins to feel seen, respected, and validated. The simple act of being heard is deeply healing. It de-escalates conflict, it dissolves defensiveness, and it creates a bridge of human connection across even the widest chasms of disagreement. When someone truly feels heard, they become more open to hearing us in return. But the benefits are not just for them. By listening deeply, we are protected. We are protected from our own reactive karmic habit of lashing out. We gain a truer, more compassionate understanding of the situation, and we are able to act from a place of wisdom instead of ignorance. When the time does come to speak, we practice the other half of this art, compassionate speech, which is a core component of the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path, known as right speech. This is not about being artificially nice or suppressing the truth. It is about learning to use our words as tools to build, to heal, and to connect, rather than as weapons to wound, to divide, and to defend our ego. Right speech has 4 beautiful and practical guidelines. First, we commit to speaking the truth and abandoning falsehood. Our words become a source of trust and reliability, creating a safe ground for authentic relationship. Second, we commit to speaking in ways that unite, not divide. We abandon slander, backbiting, and speech that sets one person against another. We choose instead to look for opportunities to foster harmony and understanding. Third, we commit to speaking with kindness and gentleness. We abandon harsh, abusive, crude, or sarcastic language which only ever causes pain. We learn to clothe our truths in words that are, as the Buddha said, pleasing to the ear and endearing. Fourth, we commit to speaking with purpose. We abandon idle chatter, meaningless gossip, and speech that wastes our own and others' time. We ask ourselves if what we are about to say is beneficial, useful, and offered at the right moment. A simple way to practice this is to pass our intended speech through 3 gates before we let it out. Before we speak, we can pause and ask ourselves, Gate 1, are these words true? Gate 2, are they kind? And Gate 3, are they necessary? If the answer to any of these is no, then perhaps the most compassionate and wise form of speech is a noble silence. The transformative power of this combination, fearless, compassionate listening, and truthful, gentle speeches, perhaps best illustrated by one of the most dramatic encounters in the Buddha's life. His meeting with the terrifying serial killer Angulimala. Angulimala, whose name meant finger garland, was a fearsome bandit who terrorized a whole region. He had vowed to kill 1,000 people, and to keep count, he would cut off a finger from each victim and wear it as a gruesome necklace. He was a figure of pure dread, a human monster. The Buddha, aware of Angulimala's rampage, decided to walk toward the very forest where the killer was known to hide. Other travelers warned him, begging him to turn back, but the Buddha continued with serene, mindful steps. Soon, Angulimala saw him. Delighted at such an easy target, he drew his sword and began to run after the calmly walking monk. But a strange thing happened. Though Angulimala was running with all his might, he could not catch up to the Buddha, who continued to walk at a normal pace. Exhausted and bewildered, Angulimala shouted from a distance, "Stop, monk, stop!" The Buddha, without turning, replied in a clear, steady voice, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not." This paradoxical response cut through Angulimala's murderous rage. He was intrigued. He had never met anyone who was not terrified of him. He demanded to know what the Buddha meant. The Buddha stopped and turned to face him, his presence radiating a complete absence of fear. He explained, "I have stopped creating the causes of suffering. I have laid down the sword of violence against all beings. You are still running, caught in the endless cycle of hatred, violence, and retribution." In that moment, the Buddha offered Angulimala the greatest gift. He listened. He saw not a monster, but a deeply suffering human being who, as the story goes, had been deceived by a jealous teacher into this life of horror. He listened to the pain behind the monstrosity, and then he spoke the truth with compassion. He spoke of the law of karma, of the futility of violence, and of the possibility of change. The power of the Buddha's fearless presence and his wise, compassionate words shattered Angulimala's world. The weight of his horrific deeds came crashing down on him. Weeping, he threw down his sword, bowed at the Buddha's feet, and asked to become a monk. He would go on to become an enlightened being himself. a testament to the fact that no one is beyond redemption, and that no wall of hatred is so thick that it cannot be penetrated by the power of compassionate communication. This is the art we are invited to practice. In every conversation, we have the choice to be Angulimala, running with the sword of our reactive words, or to be the Buddha, stopping, listening with an open heart, and speaking with an intention to heal. These practices of listening and speaking are the outward expression of a cultivated heart. They are the channels through which our inner peace can flow out to create outer harmony. But for these channels to flow with genuine warmth and not just sterile technique, they must be connected to a powerful inner source. That source, that wellspring of goodwill from which all compassionate action arises, is the boundless, radiant quality of loving kindness, or metta. We have learned the sacred arts of communication, the skills of deep listening and compassionate speech. These are the tools that allow us to build bridges of understanding in our outer world. But for these tools to be truly effective, for our words and our presence to carry the authentic warmth of healing, they must be powered by a source deep within our own heart. A bridge built with perfect technique, but a cold heart will not be crossed. The inner quality that animates all skillful interaction, the electricity that lights the lamp of compassionate speech, is the boundless and radiant energy of metta, or loving kindness. Metta is a Pali word, often translated as loving kindness, but it can also be understood as unconditional friendliness. It is a concept that is fundamentally different from our usual notions of love. Our ordinary love is often transactional, preferential, and conditional. It is directed toward those we find agreeable, who please us, who meet our needs. It is often entangled with attachment, desire, and the fear of loss. Metta, however, is a boundless goodwill that is offered without condition, without expectation of return, and without discriminating between friend, stranger, and foe. It is not necessarily an emotion. It is more fundamentally an intention, a willed aspiration. It is the sincere, heartfelt wish for all beings, without exception, to be happy, to be safe, and to be free from suffering. The practice of metta is the conscious cultivation of this state of heart, a training to make this baseline of universal friendliness our natural disposition. This practice is often done as a formal meditation, a structured training that allows us to gently stretch the capacity of our heart. It traditionally unfolds in 5 stages, like ripples expanding outward from the center of a pond. The first stage, and for many the most challenging, is to direct loving kindness toward ourselves. We cannot offer water from an empty well. If our own heart is a landscape of self-criticism, judgment, and shame, we have little genuine kindness to offer anyone else. So we begin here, with ourselves. We may find a comfortable posture, close our eyes, and silently repeat a series of simple, classic phrases, letting the intention behind them soak into our being. May I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be safe, may I live with ease. At first, a voice of resistance may arise, telling us we don't deserve it. We simply notice that voice with mindfulness and gently return to the phrases. We are planting seeds of kindness in the often neglected soil of our own heart. Once we have established some sense of this warmth for ourselves, we move to the second stage. We bring to mind a benefactor or a dearly loved friend, someone for whom it is very easy to feel affection. We visualize this person clearly in our mind's eye, and we extend the same wishes to them. May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be safe, may you live with ease. We allow our heart to naturally overflow with goodwill toward this cherished person, feeling the joy of this selfless offering. This stage helps the energy of metta to begin flowing strongly and effortlessly. In the third stage, we expand the circle. We bring to mind a neutral person, someone we see in our daily life, but for whom we have no strong feelings of like or dislike. It might be the clerk at the grocery store, a person we see on our daily commute, or a distant colleague. By directing our goodwill toward this person, we begin to break down the walls of indifference. We train the heart to care simply because they are a fellow being who, just like us, wishes to be happy. We offer them the same phrases. May you be well. May you be peaceful. This stretches our capacity for kindness beyond the familiar territory of our personal biases The fourth stage is the great challenge and the most transformative part of the practice. We bring to mind a difficult person, someone with whom we have conflict, someone who has hurt us, someone who inspires our anger or resentment. It is crucial here to understand that we are not trying to force an artificial feeling of affection, nor are we condoning their harmful actions. We are simply, as an act of will and wisdom, extending the wish for them to be well. The profound logic of this stage is this: people who are truly happy, peaceful, and self-possessed do not act in ways that cause harm to others. Their hurtful actions are a direct result of their own inner suffering, their own anger, fear, and confusion. Therefore, to wish for a difficult person to be happy is the most pragmatic wish we can make. It is a wish for them to cease being a source of suffering, both for themselves and for others. With this understanding, we hold them in our mind and, as best we can, offer the intention: may you be free from suffering, may you find true peace. This practice can begin to dissolve the hardest knots of resentment in our own hearts. Finally, in the fifth stage, we let the circle expand to its ultimate boundary, which is no boundary at all. We radiate the energy of loving kindness outward in all directions. We think of all beings, near and far, friends, neutral people, and difficult people, humans and animals, beings in our city, our country, across the world, beings seen and unseen. We hold the entire web of life in our heart and offer the boundless wish: may all beings everywhere be happy. May all beings everywhere be safe. May all beings everywhere be free. This final stage systematically dismantles the illusion of a separate self and connects us to a profound sense of kinship with all of existence. The protective and transformative power of metta is not merely a psychological comfort. It is said to be a potent force that can change our environment. A beautiful story tells of a monk who was determined to spend his retreat meditating in a particular cave. The local villagers warned him against it, saying the cave was home to a powerful and territorial serpent. The monk, undeterred, entered the cave and began his meditation. Sure enough, the great snake appeared, hissing and spreading its hood, radiating an energy of pure menace. The monk's first reaction was fear, and his mind filled with aversion. He wanted to flee or to drive the snake away. He realized this state of mind was an obstacle to his practice. So he sat down firmly, and instead of focusing on his breath, he began to practice metta. He directed all of his mental energy into waves of goodwill toward the serpent. I mean you no harm, he thought. May you be well. May you be peaceful. May you be safe here in your home. He saturated the cave with this silent, friendly intention. The snake, which had been poised to strike, sensed the dramatic shift in the monk's energy, from fear and hostility to warmth and peace. Its hood relaxed, its body uncoiled. It laid its head on the ground and became calm, allowing the monk to share its space in peace. From then on, the two coexisted as protectors of one another's solitude. We can bring this practice into every encounter in our lives. Before entering a difficult meeting, we can take a single breath and silently offer metta to everyone in the room. When our child is having a tantrum, we can meet their anger not with our own anger, but with a silent inner wish for them to be happy. When we see a stranger on the street, we can offer a fleeting, anonymous wish for their well-being. This secret, inner practice changes the entire energetic field of our interactions. It is a way of planting seeds of kindness in every corner of our world. It ensures that our starting point is always one of goodwill. Loving kindness is the foundational wish for all beings to find happiness. It is the sun that shines on everyone equally, offering its warmth without prejudice. But when that universal sunlight falls upon a being who is clearly in pain, who is lost in the darkness of active and present sorrow, that warmth naturally concentrates. It becomes a focused, powerful, and active ray, one that feels the suffering of the other and yearns to alleviate it. This ray, this heartfelt response to the direct experience of another's pain, is the sublime quality of compassion, or karuna. We have learned to cultivate the sun-like warmth of loving kindness, the unconditional wish for all beings to be happy. This is the foundation. It is the steady, radiant goodwill that we offer to the entire world without exception. But life is not always a state of placid happiness. We encounter beings who are actively in pain, whose happiness is obscured by the dark clouds of sorrow, fear, or anger. When the universal light of loving kindness shines upon this direct, palpable experience of suffering, it naturally concentrates. It transforms from a gentle warmth into a focused, powerful, and responsive beam. This beam is the second of the four sublime states of the heart. It is compassion, or karuna. If loving kindness is the wish for others to be happy, compassion is the wish for them to be free from suffering. It is the heart's natural response to the sight of pain. It is often described as a trembling or quivering of the heart. It is an embodied, resonant feeling, a recognition of our shared vulnerability. It is crucial, however, to distinguish true compassion from its near enemy, pity. Pity looks down from a position of imagined strength. It says, "Oh, you poor unfortunate thing, I am so glad I am not you." Pity creates distance. It reinforces the separation between the one who is suffering and the one who is observing. Compassion, in stark contrast, is a force of connection. It meets the other person at eye level. It recognizes the shared experience of being human and whispers, "I know this feeling of suffering. It is part of our journey. I am here with you." Compassion closes the distance. This practice calls for immense courage. It is far easier to armor our hearts with indifference, judgment, or anger than it is to allow ourselves to truly feel the pain of another. To practice compassion is to be willing to let our heart break, to let it be touched by the sorrow of the world. And the most radical application of this practice is to extend it to those who cause us suffering. This is where compassion becomes a truly transformative power. It rests on one of the most profound insights of the Buddhist path. The person who is making you suffer is, themselves, suffering deeply. Think back to the difficult person, the one who provokes your anger. Their hurtful words, their aggressive actions, these are not displays of strength. They are symptoms of a deep inner malaise. Truly happy, secure, and peaceful people have no need to belittle, control, or harm others. Aggression is almost always a mask for fear. Arrogance is a shield for insecurity. Cruelty is the cry of a heart that is itself in immense pain. When we can begin to see this, our entire inner landscape shifts. When we view the other person's action as a malicious attack from a position of strength, our natural reaction is anger, defensiveness, and fear. But when we can train our mind to see their action as the unfortunate, unskillful symptom of their own inner suffering, our reaction can change from anger to a wise and profound sadness. It is the sadness of seeing another being caught in the painful trap of their own conditioning, planting seeds of their own future misery. This shift from anger to compassionate sorrow is the very alchemy of this practice. It doesn't mean the hurt disappears, but the secondary layer of righteous indignation dissolves, leaving a space for a wiser response. This does not mean that compassion is weak or passive. It does not mean we become a doormat condoning harmful behavior. This is a common and dangerous misunderstanding. True compassion can be incredibly fierce. It is the fierce love of a mother who pulls her child away from a fire. The action is strong and decisive, but it is motivated purely by the desire to protect and prevent suffering. Sometimes, the most compassionate action is to set a firm boundary. It is to say no clearly and calmly. It may be to report unethical behavior to protect others from harm. The difference lies in the inner quality, the intention behind the act. An action born from anger seeks to punish. Its energy is, "I will make you pay." An action born from compassion seeks to protect. Its energy is, "This pattern of harm must stop for the good of all, including you." The outward action might sometimes look similar, but the inner motivation, the karmic seed, is worlds apart. One perpetuates the cycle of violence. The other seeks to end it. The most sublime example of this unwavering compassion in the face of relentless hostility is the Buddha's relationship with his own cousin, Devadatta. Devadatta was consumed by a venomous jealousy of the Buddha. He dedicated much of his life to destroying him. He tried to have him assassinated. He rolled a boulder down a hill to crush him. He unleashed a crazed, intoxicated elephant to trample him in the street. When these attempts failed, he tried to destroy the Buddhist community from within by creating a schism. Devadatta is the archetype of the enemy, the one who seems utterly undeserving of compassion. Yet, the Buddha's response was always the same, a complete absence of fear, anger, or retaliation. When the raging elephant charged, the Buddha radiated such a powerful field of loving kindness and compassion that the terrified animal is said to have slowed down, become calm, and knelt before him. When his followers, understandably furious at Devadatta's treachery, demanded retribution, the Buddha would counsel them against anger. He would explain that Devadatta was the one most to be pitied. His heart was so consumed by the poisons of hatred and ambition that he was creating for himself a future of almost unimaginable suffering. The Buddha's heart trembled not for his own safety, but for the horrific karmic destiny that his cousin was so blindly weaving for himself with every malicious act. He saw that Devadatta, in his attempt to cause suffering, was the one who was suffering the most. This is compassion in its most profound form, the ability to see the suffering inherent in unskillful action itself and to respond not with hatred, but with a deep, sorrowful wish for that being to be free. Compassion, then, is our brave and open-hearted response to the reality of pain in the world. It is the force that connects us, that motivates us to serve, and that heals the divisions between us. To feel the trembling of the world's pain, however, is a profound and demanding practice. If we stand in the middle of a storm without a firm anchor, we will be swept away. A heart that is only open and compassionate can become a bleeding heart, leading to exhaustion, burnout, and despair. We can become overwhelmed by the sheer scale of suffering we witness. Therefore, the warmth of loving kindness and the trembling of compassion must be balanced, protected, and sustained by a third great quality of the heart. This quality provides the vast, stable container in which the other two can operate effectively. It is the unshakable peace of equanimity, or upekkha. We have opened our hearts with the warmth of loving kindness, the wish for all beings to be happy. We have allowed our hearts to tremble with compassion, the wish for all beings to be free from suffering. These are the engines of a life dedicated to healing and connection. But an engine without a chassis, without a firm and stable frame, will quickly tear itself apart. A heart that is endlessly open to the pain and pleasure of the world, without a deep, grounding stability, will become exhausted. It will be tossed about on the chaotic waves of life, leading to burnout, despair, and the very opposite of peace. To protect the tender heart of compassion, and to allow both it and loving kindness to function wisely, we must cultivate the third of these sublime states, the great balancer, the unshakable anchor of the mind. This is the profound peace of equanimity, or upekkha. Equanimity is perhaps the most misunderstood of all these virtues. The word itself can sound cold, distant, uncaring. We might confuse it with indifference, apathy, or emotional suppression. But true upekkha is not a cold withdrawal from life. It is a courageous and fully engaged presence with life, exactly as it is. It is the capacity to keep our heart open and our mind balanced, regardless of the changing circumstances we face. If compassion is the trembling of the heart, equanimity is its deep, quiet stillness. It is the eye of the storm, the calm center around which the winds of life can howl without throwing us off our balance. The Buddha spoke of these winds as the 8 worldly winds, which blow ceaselessly upon all of us. They come in 4 pairs of opposites. The first pair is pleasure and pain. Our lives are a constant flow of pleasant and unpleasant sensations, feelings, and experiences. The second is gain and loss. We get the job, we lose the job. We gain a friend, we lose a friend. We acquire possessions, and they break or are lost. The third pair is praise and blame. One day we are admired for our work, the next we are criticized for the very same thing. People speak well of us, and people speak ill of us. The fourth is fame and disrepute. Our reputation rises, and our reputation falls. A mind without equanimity is like a feather caught in these winds, constantly blown high by praise and gain, then dashed to the ground by blame and loss. Our inner peace is entirely dependent on which way the wind is blowing that day. A mind imbued with equanimity, however, is like a great ancient mountain. The winds of praise may howl around it, but the mountain does not get puffed up with pride. The torrential rains of blame may lash against its rock face, but the mountain does not shrink in shame or despair. The bright sun of pleasure and fame warms it, and the deep frost of pain and loss chills it. But through it all, the mountain remains fundamentally itself, solid, grounded, present, and unwavering. Equanimity is the practice of cultivating this mountain-like stability within our own heart. It is not that we don't feel the weather of life. We feel it fully, but we are no longer defined by it. In our relationships, equanimity is the key to loving with wisdom and freedom. It is the ability to care deeply without being attached to the outcome. We can love our children with all our hearts, offering them our support, our guidance, our loving kindness. We can feel deep compassion for their struggles, but equanimity is the wise understanding that we cannot control their lives. They are the inheritors of their own karma. They must make their own choices and walk their own path. Our job is to love them, not to control them. Equanimity allows us to offer our love as a pure gift, without the strings of expectation attached. It frees our loved ones from the burden of having to live up to our vision for them, and it frees us from the anxiety and disappointment of trying to manage the unmanageable. This quality is what makes our compassion sustainable. Anyone who has worked in a caring profession or been a long-term caregiver or engaged in social activism knows the reality of compassion fatigue. When we repeatedly encounter the suffering of others, our open hearts can become overwhelmed. We can feel like we are drowning in the world's pain. This burnout happens when our compassion is not held within the vast, spacious container of equanimity. Equanimity is the understanding that while we must do everything we can to help, we are not the final arbiters of the universe. We plant the seeds of kindness and healing, but we must relinquish control over the final harvest. We do our part, and we let go of the rest. This protects us from the arrogance of thinking we can save everyone, and from the despair of realizing that we cannot. It allows us to remain engaged, helpful, and effective for the long haul, a steady flame rather than a brilliant flash that quickly consumes itself. Imagine a skilled surgeon in an emergency room. Her heart is filled with a compassionate desire to save the patient on her table. But her mind and hands must be steady, precise, and calm. If she were to be overwhelmed by grief or anxiety, she could not perform her work. Her effectiveness depends on a profound balance of compassion and equanimity. She cares deeply about the outcome, but in the moment of action, she is balanced, focused, and present. This is Upekkha in action. It is the calm center that allows for wise and compassionate engagement with the world. Together, these four sublime states loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity form a complete and perfect architecture for the heart. They are known as the Brahmaviharas, or the divine abodes, the most beautiful states in which a human being can dwell. Loving kindness is the wish for all beings to be happy. Compassion is the heart's response when they are not. Sympathetic joy is the heart's response when they are. And equanimity is the vast, boundless perspective of wisdom that holds and balances them all, ensuring that our love is not possessive, our compassion is not draining, and our joy is not exclusive. It is the panoramic view from the top of the mountain, seeing the whole landscape of life with a clear, calm, and spacious heart. With these four sublime states as our inner compass, we now possess the essential toolkit to navigate any personal encounter with grace, wisdom, and resilience. We have learned to see the mirrors held up by others not as threats, but as invitations to practice these very qualities. But our lives and our encounters do not happen in a vacuum. They are deeply embedded within the larger systems of our culture, our economies, and our structures of power. What happens when the mirror held up to us is not just a difficult individual, but an unjust society? How does this path of inner cultivation guide us when we are faced not just with personal slights, but with systemic suffering? We must now turn our gaze from the personal to the collective and see what lessons await us in the mirror of society itself. With the four sublime states of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, we have assembled a profound inner toolkit. We have learned to navigate the intimate mirrors of our personal relationships with increasing grace and wisdom. It would be tempting to stop here, to retreat into a bubble of personal peace, content with cultivating our own inner garden. But the wisdom of this path insists that our practice cannot be divorced from the world we inhabit. Our encounters do not occur in a vacuum. They are shaped and conditioned by the vast, complex, and often troubled societies in which we live. We must now turn our gaze to the largest mirror of all, the mirror of society itself. For too long, spiritual paths have been stereotyped as purely passive or escapist endeavors, a turning away from the world's problems in favor of personal bliss. This is a fundamental misunderstanding. A true spiritual practice does not offer an escape from reality. It offers a deeper and more effective way to engage with it. When we look at the world around us, we see that the conflicts we experience are often reflections of larger, systemic issues. An interaction tinged with racial bias is not just a personal failing, it is a symptom of centuries of collective karma. The stress and anxiety that fuels so much rudeness and impatience are often born from economic systems that prioritize profit over well-being. The destruction of our natural environment is the large-scale result of collective greed and short-sightedness. The mirror of society reflects our collective consciousness, our shared habits of greed, hatred, and delusion. To ignore this larger mirror is to practice a spiritual life that is incomplete. The path of the Buddha is not one of apathy. The Noble Eightfold Path contains within it the seeds of profound social engagement. Right livelihood calls on us not only to avoid professions that cause harm, but to actively participate in work that contributes to the healing of the world. Right effort includes the effort to prevent suffering from arising, not just in our own minds, but in our communities. Right action extends beyond personal conduct to the courageous act of standing up to injustice and protecting the vulnerable. The modern term for this is engaged Buddhism, a path that sees social action not as a distraction from spiritual practice, but as an essential expression of it. But this engagement must be radically different from the conventional forms of activism we often see, which are so frequently fueled by the very poisons we are trying to eliminate. This is the great challenge and the razor's edge of this practice. How do we fight for justice without becoming consumed by hatred? How do we oppose harmful systems without demonizing the people caught within them? The typical model of activism is based on anger and division. It frames the world as a battle of us versus them. There are the good guys, us, and the bad guys, the oppressors, the corporations, the politicians. This approach, while often born from a noble impulse, inevitably plants unwholesome karmic seeds. It uses harsh and divisive speech. It cultivates an energy of rage and righteousness that burns out its adherents and often alienates those it seeks to persuade. It fights hatred with more hatred, and in doing so, it perpetuates the very cycle of conflict it aims to end. The path of compassionate action, or engaged Buddhism, offers a different way. It is rooted in the deep understanding that the so-called oppressor is also a victim. They are a victim of their own greed, their own fear, their own ignorance, and of the same harmful systems that they perpetuate. The CEO of a polluting company is trapped by a system that demands infinite growth. The politician beholden to special interests is trapped by a system of power and money. From this perspective, the fight is not against a group of evil people. The fight is against the mental states of greed, hatred, and delusion wherever they appear in ourselves, in others, and in our social structures. The goal is not to destroy the opponent, but to awaken them. The goal is to dismantle the system of suffering for the liberation of everyone involved, the oppressed and the oppressor alike. This is action powered by compassion, karuna, and protected from burnout by equanimity, upekkha. It is fierce, unwavering, and sustainable because it is not poisoned by hate. Imagine a village whose life depends on a great river. For generations, the water was pure and life-giving, but now the water has become polluted, and the people are getting sick. The first group of villagers simply feels powerless. They continue to drink the polluted water, complaining but doing nothing, falling into apathy. This is the path of ignoring the problem. The second villager is more resourceful. He builds an elaborate filtration system for his own house. He and his family now have clean water, and he feels he has solved the problem. He has achieved personal purity, but he turns his back on his suffering neighbors. This is the spiritual bypass, a practice that insulates the self but refuses to engage with the world. The third villager is filled with rage. He identifies the factory upstream that is dumping the waste. He organizes angry protest. He shouts. He demonizes the factory owner. He blocks the roads. His anger is righteous and his actions draw attention, but they also create deep lines of division and animosity in the community, making a collaborative solution almost impossible. He is fighting fire with more fire. Then there is a fourth villager who walks the path of engaged wisdom. She feels deep compassion for everyone involved, for the sick children in her own village, and also for the factory owner, who she understands may be trapped by economic pressures and his own lack of vision. Her first action is practical and compassionate. She works with the community to set up simple, temporary water filters for everyone, alleviating the immediate suffering. Then, with a calm mind, she begins to walk upstream. She doesn't go with an army and a list of demands. She goes with a clear intention to understand the entire system. She talks to the workers at the factory. She studies the economics of the region. She speaks with the factory owner, not as an enemy, but as a fellow human being caught in a difficult situation. She listens deeply. Because she is not driven by rage, she is able to build alliances. She brings together villagers, workers, the owner, and local leaders. Together, they begin to explore creative solutions, new technologies, different economic models, ways to clean the river that can benefit everyone. Her action is not a single, angry outburst. It is a patient, persistent, and intelligent process of healing the entire system. She is not just trying to get clean water for herself, she is trying to restore the health of the entire river. This is the invitation. Our personal liberation is not separate from the liberation of all beings. Our inner peace is inextricably linked to peace and justice in the world. To work for a better world is a noble and necessary expression of our practice. Yet, this work requires immense patience and resilience, for we are working with systems that are slow to change and facing problems that may not be solved in our lifetime. This forces us to confront, on a grand scale, the universal truth of impermanence. We must learn to act with passion and dedication while simultaneously letting go of our attachment to specific outcomes and timelines. We must learn the profound art of planting trees in whose shade we may never live to sit. In our exploration of compassionate action, of working to heal the wounds of our society, we inevitably arrive at a place of profound humility. We see that the problems are vast and complex, and that our efforts, however sincere, may not bear fruit in the way we expect, or even in our own lifetime. This realization forces us to confront one of the most fundamental, challenging, and ultimately liberating truths of existence, the truth of impermanence. This principle, known in Pali as anicca, is one of the three foundational pillars of Buddhist wisdom, alongside the truth of suffering, dukkha, and the truth of no self, anatta. To understand impermanence is to understand the fundamental nature of reality itself. When we hear the word impermanence, our minds often jump to the big dramatic examples: the end of a life, the fall of an empire, the erosion of a coastline. These are indeed expressions of anicca on a grand scale, but the true practice is to see impermanence not as a distant event, but as an immediate, constant, and intimate process that is happening right now. It is in the breath that is arising and passing away in this very moment. It is in the thought that just appeared in your mind and has now already vanished. It is in the sounds you are hearing, which rise and fall, and are replaced by new sounds. The cells in your body are in a ceaseless dance of dying and being reborn. The planet beneath you is hurtling through space, and the universe itself is in a state of constant expansion. There is nothing, from the smallest subatomic particle to the largest galaxy, that is static. Change is the one non-negotiable law of the cosmos. This truth is not inherently good or bad. It simply is. Our suffering does not arise from the fact of impermanence itself. It arises from our persistent, deeply ingrained resistance to it. We live in a state of constant, low-grade warfare with reality, a futile struggle to make permanent that which is by nature fleeting. This struggle manifests in two primary ways. First, we cling to what is pleasant. We experience a moment of pure joy, a perfect evening with a loved one, a success at work, a feeling of vibrant health. Our immediate instinctual reaction is to grasp it, to hold on to it. We think, this is it. I want to feel this way forever. We try to freeze the moment, to build a fortress around it. But the fortress is made of sand. The moment passes, as it must, and our clinging turns the sweet memory into a source of pain. We mourn its absence and feel that our present reality is lacking in comparison. Second, we have a deep aversion to what is unpleasant. When we experience physical pain, emotional grief, or a difficult situation, our instinct is to push it away with all our might. We want it to end now. We believe, on some level, that the pain will last forever, and this belief adds a layer of panic and despair on top of the pain itself. A deep understanding of impermanence becomes a source of immense solace in these moments. It is the quiet, wise voice that reminds us, this too shall pass. The agonizing grief, the sharp anger, the heavy despair, they are all clouds passing through the sky of our awareness. They are not permanent fixtures. They arise due to causes and conditions. They stay for a while, and when the conditions change, they will pass away. This doesn't magically erase the pain, but it changes our relationship to it. It allows us to endure it with a measure of grace and patience, knowing that we are not trapped forever. Perhaps the most potent image for understanding this constant flux is that of a flowing river. A great teacher once said that you can never step into the same river twice. Imagine yourself standing on the bank. You take a step into the cool water, and the current swirls around your ankles. You step out, and then a moment later you step back in. Is this the same river? Clearly not. The water molecules that touched you just moments ago are now far downstream, already on their way to the ocean. A completely new collection of water is now flowing past, but the wisdom of this image goes deeper. Is the person stepping into the river for the second time the same person who stepped in the first time? In that brief interval, your body has changed. Your mind has produced a new stream of thoughts. Your perspective has shifted, even in the most subtle way. Both the observer and the observed, the self and the world, are not static entities but dynamic, flowing processes. This is the truth of our relationships. The person you fell in love with 10 years ago does not exist today in the same way. The child you held in your arms as an infant is gone, replaced by the toddler, the teenager, the adult. And you, the one who is loving, are also in a constant state of becoming. To expect a person or a relationship to remain unchanged is to expect the river to freeze solid for our convenience. This is the source of so much disappointment and conflict. We fall in love with a snapshot, a memory, and we resent the living, breathing person when they inevitably change and fail to conform to our frozen image of them. True, wise love is not about possessing a photograph. It is about learning to love the river itself. It is the practice of walking alongside another flowing stream of being, appreciating its beauty, its twists, and its turns in each present moment, without demanding that it stop flowing. To contemplate impermanence is not, as it may seem, a pessimistic or morbid exercise. On the contrary, it is the ultimate key to living a life of profound gratitude, meaning, and presence. When you truly, deeply understand that this present moment will never, ever come again, it becomes infinitely precious. The simple act of sharing a meal with a friend, of listening to a piece of music, of feeling the sun on your skin, all of these ordinary experiences are revealed to be extraordinary, unrepeatable miracles. The knowledge of their fleeting nature is precisely what gives them their depth and beauty. This understanding cuts through our tendency to procrastinate, to take life for granted. It urges us to say what needs to be said, to express our love and gratitude now, not later, for we are never guaranteed a later. It also helps us to let go of old grievances. Why carry the heavy stone of a past hurt when both the person who hurt you and the you who was hurt are no longer the same? To hold on to a grudge is to be haunted by ghosts. Impermanence invites us to let them go and to travel more lightly in the present. We have now looked at the three fundamental characteristics of all conditioned existence, the three marks of existence. We have seen that life is marked by a fundamental unsatisfactoriness or dukkha because we suffer. We suffer because we cling to things as if they were permanent and as if we had a solid, separate self or anatta to protect. And we have now seen that the reason this clinging causes suffering is because it flies in the face of reality, the absolute universal law of impermanence, or anicca. Understanding these three truths is like peeling back the first, most obvious layer of illusion. It clears the ground. But it begs a deeper question. If everything is an ever-changing, selfless flow, what is the fundamental nature of the flow itself? What is everything made of, if not solid, separate, permanent things? To go deeper still, to the very heart of reality, we must now approach one of the most profound, subtle, and liberating concepts in this entire path, the wisdom that understands emptiness, or sunyata. We have journeyed through the observable landscape of our existence, mapping its three great features. We have acknowledged the reality of dissatisfaction, dukkha. We have seen through the illusion of a solid, separate self, the truth of anatta, and we have bowed to the universal law of change, the truth of anicca, or impermanence. To understand these three marks is to clear away the debris of our most basic misconceptions. But now, our inquiry must go deeper, beneath the surface characteristics, to the very substance of reality itself. We must ask the question, if everything is a selfless, ever-changing flow, what is the nature of that flow? This leads us to what is perhaps the most profound, challenging, and ultimately liberating teaching of this path, the wisdom that understands emptiness, or sunyata. The word emptiness can be terrifying to the Western mind. It conjures images of a cold, black void, a meaningless abyss, a bleak and nihilistic nothingness. It is absolutely essential to understand from the very beginning that this is not what Buddhist emptiness means. Sunyata is not the absence of everything. It is the absence of one specific thing. It is the absence of a separate, independent, inherent existence. Things are not empty in a general sense. They are precisely empty of a standalone self. This is a subtle but crucial distinction. It is the universal application of the principle of no self. We have seen that I am empty of a solid, separate self. Sunyata is the realization that the chair you are sitting on, the sound you are hearing, the tree outside your window, and the person you are in conflict with are also, in exactly the same way, empty of a separate self. This is a truth that cannot be fully grasped by the logical, analytical mind alone, for that mind works by creating divisions and categories. Emptiness points to a reality that transcends these divisions. The best way to approach it is through contemplation, with the help of a powerful image offered by the great Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh. Let us look deeply, together, at a simple sheet of paper. On the surface, we see a sheet of paper. It seems to be a distinct object, separate from the table it rests on, separate from us. But let us look with the eyes of a meditator. If we look deeply into the paper, we can see a cloud floating in a blue sky. This is not poetry. It is a reality. Without a cloud, there can be no rain. Without rain, the tree cannot grow. And without the tree, there can be no paper. So the cloud is undeniably present in the sheet of paper. If we take the cloud out of the paper can no longer exist. And if we continue to look, we see the sunshine. The sunshine is essential for the tree to grow through photosynthesis. The warmth of the sun, the light of the sun, is also in the sheet of paper. If we take the sunshine out, the paper vanishes. And of course, we see the tree itself, the forest, the pulp that forms the very fibers of the paper, and we see the logger who cut down the tree. We can see his arms, his muscles, his sweat, and if we see the logger, we must also see the bread he ate for breakfast that gave him the energy to do his work. And if we see the bread, we must see the wheat from which it was made, the field in which it grew, the soil, the earth, and the rain that nourished it. We see the baker who baked the bread, and the truck driver who brought it to the store. We see the logger's parents, and their parents, and all the generations of ancestors whose coming together allowed for his existence. We see the person who designed the saw, the people who worked in the factory to make it, the miners who extracted the iron ore from the earth. All of these people, all of these conditions, are present in this simple sheet of paper. If you were to try and return these elements to their source, if you gave the sunshine back to the sun, the cloud back to the sky, the tree back to the forest, the logger back to his parents, what would be left? There would be nothing. No paper. The sheet of paper is composed entirely of what we might call non-paper elements. It has no separate, independent self-existence. It is empty of a private self. Its entire being is dependent on the co-arising of everything else in the universe. This state of being, this truth that everything is made only of everything else, is what is meant by emptiness. Now, let us apply this profound vision to our relationships. Let us bring this sheet of paper into the meeting room with our difficult colleague. When we feel the sting of their words, the habitual reaction is to see two separate, solid, opposing entities, me here and him over there. But if we look deeply with the eyes of wisdom, we see that I am empty of a separate self. I am made of my parents, my teachers, my experiences, the food I ate this morning, the air I am breathing right now. My feeling of being offended is not an isolated event. It is conditioned by 1,000 past causes, and that other person over there is also empty of a separate, solid self. He is made of his own infinite web of causes and conditions. His childhood, his own insecurities, his pressures at work, his argument with his spouse this morning, his hurtful words are the flowering of seeds planted long ago. When we truly see the emptiness of both self and other, the rigid, solid line between us begins to dissolve. The conflict is no longer a battle between two opposing armies. It is a momentary, conditioned friction within a single, unified field of existence. The sharp, solid target of me becomes transparent. The arrow of the insult has nothing to hit. This is not an intellectual trick. It is a shift in perception that completely changes our emotional landscape. We are freed from the tyranny of fixed labels. We no longer see our colleague as an arrogant person, a solid, permanent entity. We see a dynamic process that is, at this moment, manifesting arrogant behavior due to certain conditions. And because processes can change, this insight opens the door to hope, patience, and compassion in a way that rigid labels never can. From this perspective, we can see that emptiness is the very opposite of a bleak nothingness. It is a radical, awe-inspiring fullness. It means that because a thing is empty of a private self, it is therefore full of the entire cosmos. This sheet of paper is full of the sun, the earth, and the sky. You are full of all your ancestors, all your teachers, the whole history of the universe. There is no separation. This is the ultimate antidote to the modern plague of alienation and loneliness. You are not a separate fragment struggling against the universe. You are the universe, experiencing itself in this particular form for a little while. This direct seeing of emptiness is not just a philosophical viewpoint. It is the perception of the fundamental law that governs all of reality. The very fact that the paper is empty of a separate self, because it is composed of the sun, the cloud, and the logger, points directly to its positive corollary, the great principle that makes the universe function. If everything is empty of a separate self, it is because everything arises in dependence on everything else. This is the profound truth of interconnectedness, of interdependence. To see this is to see the world not as a collection of discrete, separate things, but as a single, seamless, vibrating web of relationships, where every part affects every other part. In our journey to the heart of reality, we have peeled away the layers of illusion. We began with the solid-seeming self and discovered it was a selfless process. We looked at the world of solid, separate objects and found it to be an ever-changing flow. This led us to the profound truth of emptiness, the realization that nothing exists on its own, independent of other things. This understanding, as deep as it is not the final destination. Emptiness is not a conclusion, it is a doorway. And when we step through that doorway, we enter into a luminous and breathtaking landscape, the landscape of utter and absolute interconnectedness. This is the positive expression of emptiness, the great principle that the Buddha called pratitya samutpada, or dependent origination. This multi-syllabled word expresses a very simple and profound law. This is because that is. This is not because that is not. This arises because that arises. This ceases because that ceases. Nothing exists in a vacuum. Everything comes into being in dependence on other factors. A flame depends on fuel, oxygen, and a source of heat. Take away any one of these conditions, and the flame, which we thought of as a thing, simply vanishes. It has no independent existence. It is a process born of conditions. So it is with everything. So it is with us. The truth of emptiness shows us what we are not. We are not separate. The truth of interdependence shows us what we are. We are inextricably woven into the fabric of all that is. To help the mind grasp this staggering reality, the ancient sages of the Mahayana tradition offered a beautiful and powerful metaphor, the vision of Indra's net. Imagine a vast cosmic net that stretches out infinitely in all directions beyond space and time. At every single node where the threads of the net cross, there hangs a single, perfect, multifaceted jewel. The net is infinite, and so the jewels are infinite in number. Now, if you were to look closely at the polished surface of any one of these jewels, you would see something miraculous. You would see the reflections of every other jewel in the entire net. And within each of those reflections, you would see the reflections of all the other jewels, and so on, in an endless, cascading, holographic display of light and intimacy. Each jewel in this cosmic net represents a single being, a single event, a single atom, a single thought. No jewel hangs there on its own. Its very existence is defined by its place within the whole and its relationship to every other jewel. This is the truth of emptiness, but the reflections are the key to understanding interdependence. The reflections mean that the existence of every jewel is immediately and intimately present in every other jewel. The health of the whole net is present in each part, and the state of each part affects the whole. If a single jewel were to be smudged with a speck of dust, that smudge would be reflected in every other jewel throughout the infinite expanse. If a single jewel were to catch the light in a particularly brilliant way, that flash of brilliance would instantly shimmer across the entire web. This is not poetry. It is a description of the universe we live in. We are all jewels in this net. The idea that we can act in isolation is the primary illusion of the separate self. When we speak a harsh word to another person, we believe we are simply affecting them. But Indra's net teaches us that the moment we project that negativity, our own jewel is instantly marred by the reflection of the hurt and anger we have created in the other. When we harm another, we are, in that very instant, harming ourselves. Our reality becomes a reflection of the ugliness we have created. Conversely, when we perform an act of genuine, selfless kindness offering, a helping hand, speaking a word of encouragement, generating a silent wish of loving kindness, our own jewel is instantly illuminated by the reflection of the goodness we have brought into the world. Helping another is, in the most direct and immediate sense, helping ourselves. Our reality becomes a reflection of the beauty we have co-created. Let us bring this cosmic vision down to earth, back into our human relationships. The person you find most difficult, the colleague who angers you, the family member who misunderstands you, they are another jewel in the net. Their current state, their defensiveness, their aggression, is conditioned by and reflects countless other jewels, their upbringing, their hidden fears, their daily stresses, the society they live in, and you and your reactions are also a reflection of your own infinite web of conditions. The encounter between you is not a simple clash between two separate objects. It is a moment in which the entire universe, with all its history and all its conditions, is meeting itself and playing out a particular pattern. When we see this, the tight defensive knot of me versus you begins to loosen. The rigid boundary we draw around our own jewel becomes transparent. We see that their suffering is reflected in us, and our peace is reflected in them. We understand that their healing and our healing are not separate events. An act of compassion offered to them is an act of healing for the entire net, ourselves included. An act of anger hardens not just them, but the entire fabric of our shared reality. This understanding doesn't necessarily make the interaction easy, but it removes the bitter poison of personal opposition. We are no longer two warriors locked in combat. We are two interconnected parts of a single, complex system, both seeking, in our own skillful or unskillful ways, to be happy and free from suffering. This vision extends to all of life. The tree outside our window is a jewel. The air we breathe is a jewel. The water we drink is a jewel. The pollution of a river is not just a problem for the fish. It is a sickness that dulls the sheen of every jewel in the net. The clear cutting of a forest is not a remote tragedy. It is a tear in the fabric that weakens the integrity of the whole. There is no out there that is separate from in here. The health of the planet and the health of our own mind are not two different things. To see the world as Indra's net is to undergo a fundamental revolution in perspective. It is to move from a life of alienation to a life of profound intimacy with all that is. The lines between self and other, cause and effect, friend and enemy, become beautifully and liberatingly blurred. With this vision as our foundation, nothing can be seen as purely negative or as a meaningless obstacle. Every encounter, every challenge, every moment of pain becomes rich with meaning. It is all raw material, potent fuel for the journey of awakening. We are now ready to explore the ultimate spiritual alchemy, the practice that rests upon this vision of interdependence, the sacred art of transforming the mud of our suffering into the lotus of wisdom. We have journeyed to the stunning vision of Indra's net, a holographic universe where every being and every event is intimately interconnected with all others. We see that we are not isolated fragments, but threads in a single, seamless cosmic tapestry. This realization is not merely a beautiful idea, it is a profoundly practical one. If everything is interconnected, if nothing exists in isolation, then it logically follows that nothing can be a true obstacle. That which we call an obstacle is not a separate thing blocking our way. It is simply part of the path itself, a contour in the landscape that we must learn to navigate. This leads us to one of the most powerful and liberating practices on this path, the sacred alchemy of transformation, the art of turning the mud of our lives into a fragrant lotus flower. In many spiritual traditions, the goal is seen as one of purification through elimination. The aim is to get rid of the bad parts of ourselves, the anger, the fear, the desire, in order to arrive at a state of pure goodness. The Buddhist path offers a different, more radical approach. It does not seek to eliminate the mud, but to use it. The lotus flower, a timeless symbol of enlightenment and purity, does not grow in sterile, purified soil. It does not grow on a pristine mountaintop. The lotus pushes its roots down into the thick, dark, nutrient-rich mud at the bottom of the pond. The mud is not an impediment to the lotus. It is the very source of its nourishment. Without the mud, there can be no lotus. This is the central metaphor for our lives. The mud is our suffering, our confusion, our difficult relationships, our messy, painful emotions. Our instinct is to try and escape the mud, to pretend it isn't there, or to condemn ourselves for having it. This practice invites us to do the opposite. It invites us to honor the mud, to see it not as a sign of our failure, but as the compost, the fertile ground from which the lotus of our wisdom and compassion can bloom. A spiritual life that avoids the messiness of real human experience will be a sterile and lifeless one. It is by courageously turning toward our difficulties that we find the very ingredients we need for our liberation. This is the art of alchemy, to take the base metals of our suffering and transmute them into the gold of awakening. This is not about pretending our negative emotions are actually positive. It is about recognizing the raw, powerful energy that is bound up within them, and learning to liberate that energy and channel it in a wise direction. Let us look at the three primary poisons of the mind anger: greed and ignorance, and see how they can be transformed. First, there is the poison of anger and aversion. In its raw, reactive form, it is the hot coal that burns us, a destructive force that creates conflict and deepens our suffering. But what is the underlying energy of anger? It is an energy of clarity, focus, and the power to push things away. When this raw energy is held in the spacious container of mindfulness and compassion, it is no longer a poison. It is transformed. The clarity of anger, its sharp perception of what is wrong and unjust, can be transmuted into the fierce energy of compassionate action. The impulse to destroy can become the fierce determination to protect the vulnerable. The heat of our personal rage can become the warmth of a passion for justice. When we see suffering caused by social inequality or environmental destruction, the anger that arises is not something to be suppressed. It is potent fuel. We can channel that energy into volunteering, into speaking out with wisdom, into working tirelessly to create a better world. The energy is the same. Its expression has been alchemized from a destructive poison into a powerful medicine. Next, there is the poison of greed, grasping, and obsessive desire. In its raw form, it is the endless thirst that leaves us feeling perpetually dissatisfied, the clinging that leads to envy and disappointment. But what is the energy of desire? It is the energy of connection, of reaching out, of aspiration. It is the longing for happiness and fulfillment. When we look deeply into this energy, instead of blindly following it toward external objects, we can transform its direction. The desire for our own personal happiness can be expanded and transformed into the boundless wish of loving kindness, the aspiration for all beings to be happy. The grasping energy of "I want this for me" can be transmuted into the open-handed energy of generosity, the joy of giving. We still have the energy of wanting, but it has been purified from a selfish craving into a selfless offering. Finally, there is the deepest poison of ignorance, or delusion. This is the energy of confusion, of not seeing things clearly. It is the root of fear, prejudice, and all the ways we create separation between ourselves and others. In its raw form, it is a dark and bewildering fog. But when we meet this energy of confusion with gentle, patient curiosity, it becomes the very engine of our quest for wisdom. The painful feeling of not knowing is the indispensable starting point for all learning. The darkness of delusion motivates us to seek the light of awareness. Our questions, our doubts, our uncertainties, these are not signs of failure. They are the growing edge of our understanding. Our confusion itself becomes our greatest teacher, pointing us with perfect accuracy to the very things we need to investigate more deeply. With this alchemical view, our entire relationship to life, and especially to our difficult encounters, is revolutionized. The person who triggers our anger is no longer just a problem to be managed. They are offering us a precious, unsolicited gift, the raw material of anger with which we can practice the alchemy of compassion. The situation that fills us with fear and confusion is no longer a setback. It is a direct invitation to cultivate wisdom and courage. The suffering that a relationship may cause us is the very mud that forces the roots of our equanimity to grow deep and strong, so that our lotus may rise above the water, stable and serene. Every moment, no matter how challenging, becomes a workable part of the path. This leads to one of the most profound realizations. The path is the goal. In the beginning, we imagine that we are here, in a state of suffering, and that enlightenment is over there, a distant future achievement. We believe the practice is about getting rid of all the mud so that we can finally arrive at the pristine flower. But the mature practice reveals that there is no separation. The process of courageously and compassionately working with the mud is the flowering of the lotus. There is no destination to get to that is separate from the journey we are on right now. Every step, every breath, every difficult emotion, every challenging encounter, this is it. This is the path. There are no detours. When we can truly begin to see that every person, every emotion, and every situation is the raw material for our awakening, a profound shift occurs. The relentless habit of our mind to judge, to categorize experiences as good or bad, as helpful or hindering, begins to soften and dissolve. We no longer need to constantly curate our lives, desperately seeking the pleasant and anxiously avoiding the unpleasant. We can finally begin to meet reality on its own terms, with an open, trusting, and courageous heart. This leads us to the practice of radical acceptance, of learning to see the world and everyone in it with the clear, unobstructed, and non-judgmental eyes of a Buddha. Through the transformative lens of alchemy, we have begun to see that every experience, no matter how difficult, can be fuel for our awakening. The mud of our lives is the very nourishment for the lotus of our wisdom. When we truly begin to embody this understanding, a natural consequence arises. The powerful, deeply ingrained habit of judging ourselves and others begins to soften. The mind's relentless need to categorize the world, to sort every experience and every person into the dualistic boxes of good and bad, right and wrong, friend and enemy, starts to lose its grip. We are now ready to explore the profound practice of consciously releasing judgment, of learning to see the world and everyone in it with the clear, spacious, and unobstructed eyes of a Buddha. Judgment is one of the ego's primary survival strategies. It is a mental mechanism that creates a sense of separation, and through that separation, a false sense of superiority and security. By labeling another person as wrong, foolish, or immoral, our ego gets to feel right, wise, and virtuous in comparison. It is a constant process of propping up our own fragile sense of self by pushing others down. This mental habit keeps us in a state of perpetual tension. We become a critic of life, standing on the sidelines with a scorecard, rather than a full participant in its messy, beautiful, and unpredictable flow. This constant commentary closes our hearts, drains our energy, and makes genuine, authentic connection impossible. It is a prison we build for ourselves, bar by painful bar. To dismantle this prison, we must cultivate a radically different way of seeing. We must train ourselves to look past the surface-level behavior of a person and see the deeper truth of their being. In the Mahayana tradition of Buddhism, this deeper truth is known as Buddha nature, or Tathagatagarbha. This is the profound and beautiful teaching that within every single sentient being, without exception, there exists an innate, indestructible, and luminous potential for awakening. It is the seed of perfect wisdom and compassion that lies at the core of our consciousness. This Buddha nature can be obscured. It can be buried beneath thick layers of mud, the mud of anger, greed, ignorance, trauma, and conditioning. But it can never be tainted or destroyed. It is like a flawless diamond buried in a lump of coal, or a seam of pure gold hidden within rough, ordinary rock. The practice of releasing judgment is the practice of consciously shifting our focus from the outer layer of mud to the inner diamond. It is the choice to look for the Buddha nature in everyone we meet. When we encounter a person acting out of anger, we can train ourselves to see not just the anger, but to remember the obscured seed of peace within them. When we encounter a person acting from greed, we can remember the hidden potential for generosity within them. When we encounter someone lost in ignorance and prejudice, we can remember the luminous, sleeping wisdom that is their true birthright. This practice is supported by a powerful and compassionate refrain. The understanding that every person is doing the very best they can, given their current level of wisdom, their past conditioning, and their present circumstances. Their unskillful and hurtful actions are not a sign of inherent evil. They are a sign of their own deep suffering and confusion. They, like all beings, are simply seeking happiness and trying to avoid pain. Their methods may be misguided, counterproductive, and even harmful, but the underlying intention is the same one that drives us all. When we can truly see this, our harsh judgment naturally softens into a wise and sorrowful compassion. We see not a monster to be condemned, but a fellow being, lost in the fog, desperately trying to find their way home. There is a powerful story in the Lotus Sutra, one of the great texts of this tradition, that perfectly illustrates this practice. It is the story of a bodhisattva awakening being named Sadaparabhuta, which means never disparaging. His spiritual practice was simple and singular. He did not spend all his time in silent meditation or scholarly study. Instead, whenever he met another personbi, they a monk, a nun, a layman, or a laywoman, he would stop, bow down to them deeply, and say with great sincerity, "I dare not hold you in contempt. I deeply respect you because you are all practicing the bodhisattva path and are destined to become Buddhas." The people of his time did not understand this practice. They were confused and angered by it. They thought he was being insincere or that he was mocking them. In response to his profound respect, they met him with scorn and insults. They called him a fool. They threw dirt, rocks, and sticks at him. But Sadaparabhuta's practice never wavered. Even as he was being beaten, he would retreat to a safe distance, still bowing, and shout back to them, "I still dare not disparage you, for you will all, one day, become Buddhas." What was he doing? He was not condoning their abusive behavior. He was not pretending their actions were kind. He was engaged in a radical act of perception. He was consciously choosing to ignore the temporary, conditioned mud of their anger and violence, and to speak directly to the timeless, unconditioned diamond of their Buddha nature. He saw who they truly were, beneath the layers of their confusion. And the story concludes that because of the great merit of this unwavering practice of non-judgment, Sadaparabhuta himself attained full awakening. And in future lives, the very same people who had persecuted him became his most devoted disciples, their own Buddha nature having been awakened by the power of his unshakable respect. This is not a call to be naive. It is not a suggestion to ignore harmful behavior or to allow ourselves or others to be victimized. We still must practice compassionate action and set firm boundaries to prevent harm, but it is a conscious, strategic choice about where we place our focus. Do we focus on the temporary, conditioned behavior, or on the timeless, unconditioned potential? To focus on the behavior alone leads to a world of endless judgment, conflict, and separation. To focus on the Buddha nature within leads to a world of boundless compassion, patience, and connection. It is the choice to believe in the seed of the oak tree, even when all we can see is a humble acorn. It is this faith in the potential for goodness in all beings that gives us the strength to continue on this path with a hopeful and open heart. To see the hidden diamond in our greatest adversary is a profound act of spiritual maturity. It frees us from the heavy burden of resentment and opens the door to a more peaceful way of being in the world. But as we practice this, we may discover that there is one person we find it almost impossible to see this beauty in. There is one person whose flaws we know intimately, whose past mistakes we replay endlessly, and whose mud we are most ashamed of. Often, the last person we are willing to extend this radical, non-judgmental acceptance to is ourself. To complete the circle of non-judgment, we must learn to turn this compassionate gaze inward. We must learn to forgive our own imperfections, to embrace our own muddy past, and to offer ourselves the same unconditional grace we are learning to offer to the world. This is the healing power of forgiveness. We have walked the courageous path of non-judgment, learning to see past the obscuring mud of conditioned behavior to the indestructible diamond of Buddha nature that lies within every being. This practice dissolves the walls of separation our ego has built, allowing a spacious and compassionate acceptance to permeate our view of the world. Yet, as we extend this grace to others, even to our adversaries, we often find that the highest wall, the most fortified prison, is the one we have built around our own heart. It is the prison of the past, its walls mortared with old hurts, its air thick with the dust of resentment. To truly be free, we must learn to use the master key that opens this final gate. This key is the profound and healing power of forgiveness. Forgiveness is one of the most vital and most misunderstood concepts on the spiritual path. It is essential, from the outset, to be very clear about what forgiveness is and what it is not. Forgiveness is not condoning. It is not saying that a harmful action was acceptable. It does not mean we must excuse or forget abuse, injustice, or betrayal. Forgiveness is not necessarily reconciliation. It does not mean we are obligated to allow a person who has harmed us back into our lives. There is no spiritual imperative to place ourselves back in a dangerous or toxic situation. Forgiveness, in its essence, is not something we do for the other person. It is a radical act of self-love, a compassionate gift we give to ourselves. The Buddha used a powerful simile. He said that holding on to anger and resentment is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. We have already explored this in the context of anger, but it is the very heart of forgiveness. To refuse to forgive is to continue to hold that burning coal day after day, year after year. We walk through life with a clenched fist, our energy constantly consumed by replaying the past, nursing the grievance, and keeping the wound fresh. The person who harmed us may be living their life, completely unaware of our turmoil, but we, the one holding the coal, are the one whose hand is being seared. To refuse to forgive is to drink a cup of poison every single day and expect the other person to die. Forgiveness is the wise, courageous, and profoundly sane act of putting down the cup. It is the decision to stop poisoning ourselves. Forgiveness is the act of cutting the energetic cord that binds us to the person or event that caused us pain. As long as we are defined by our resentment, we remain tethered to the past. Our thoughts, our emotions, and even our identity can become wrapped around the story of our wound. We are not a free person. We are a victim, a survivor, a person who was wronged. We give the person who hurt us the power to continue to occupy space in our mind, rent-free, long after the event is over. Forgiveness is the act of revoking that power. It is an internal declaration of independence. It is saying, I will no longer allow what you did in the past to control my present happiness. I release my claim on the debt I feel you owe me. I release you from my anger, not for your sake, but for mine. I choose freedom. This is not a simple one-time decision. It is a process, often a long and difficult one. It begins with the mindful acknowledgement of our pain. We must allow ourselves to feel the anger, the grief, the sense of injustice without judgment. We give our wound the clean air of our compassionate attention. Then, drawing on the wisdom we have cultivated, the process can unfold. We can reflect on impermanence, recognizing that both the person who harmed us and the us who was harmed are no longer the same. We are all part of a constantly changing flow. We can reflect on compassion, contemplating the suffering and confusion that must have been present in the other person's mind to cause them to act in such a way. And we can reflect on interdependence, seeing how their action and our suffering are part of a vast web of causes and conditions. As these understandings deepen, the hard knot of our resentment begins to loosen, and the possibility of letting go emerges not as a duty, but as a natural unfolding of wisdom. This practice of forgiving others is essential, but for many of us, the deeper and more stubborn work is learning to forgive ourselves. We are often our own harshest critics, our own most merciless judges. We keep a detailed ledger of all our past failings, our moments of cowardice, our unskillful words, our selfish actions. We can be haunted for decades by a mistake we made, trapped in a cycle of shame and self-recrimination. We must learn to turn the gentle gaze of forgiveness inward. We must look at the person we were in the past, the person who made that mistake, with the same compassion we would offer a dear friend. We must see that we were doing the best we could with the tools, the understanding, and the level of awareness we had at that time. If we had known better, we would have done better. Self-forgiveness is not a way of letting ourselves off the hook. It is not an excuse for future bad behavior. On the contrary, it is the very thing that allows us to grow. Shame keeps us stuck. It paralyzes us. Self-forgiveness, when paired with a sincere commitment to learn from our mistakes, is what allows us to move forward with a renewed intention to act with greater wisdom and kindness. It is about embracing our flawed, imperfect, beautiful humanity. It is about acknowledging the mud of our past without letting it define the lotus we can become. There is a story of a man who was unjustly thrown into a dungeon and kept in heavy chains for 20 years. He grew accustomed to the cold iron on his wrists and ankles, the way he had to shuffle his feet to walk, the constant weight that was his only companion. One day, a decree of amnesty was declared. The guards came, unlocked his cell, and told him he was free to go. The prison gates were thrown open. The man walked out into the bright sunlight, a free man, but as he walked down the road, he still shuffled his feet. He still held his hands close together, as if the chains were still there. His body and mind had become so identified with his state as a prisoner that even in freedom he carried his prison with him. The chains were gone, but their memory was a ghost that still bound him. Resentment, grievances, and the refusal to forgive are those invisible chains. They keep us tethered to the prisons of our past long after the doors have been opened. Forgiveness is the conscious, courageous act of realizing that we are free. It is the moment we stop shuffling and stand up straight, the moment we swing our arms and realize there is nothing holding them back. It is the moment we leave the ghost of the chains lying on the road behind us and walk, unburdened, into the new day. Having released the heavy chains of judgment and resentment through the power of forgiveness, our hearts are now lighter, more spacious, and more free than ever before. We have looked into the mirrors of self and other and learned the lessons of anger, desire, love, and society. We have transformed the mud into the lotus. Now, we must ask, for what purpose? What is the ultimate expression of this hard-won freedom and wisdom? The path culminates in a final, beautiful turn, away from a focus on our own liberation toward a dedication to the liberation of all. We are ready to see every being not just as a mirror or a teacher, but as a potential Buddha, and to see ourselves as a bodhisattva in their service. We have traveled a long and transformative road on this journey of the mirror. We began by seeing others as the source of our suffering, their actions as random arrows striking our fragile peace. Through the lens of wisdom, we learn to see them as mirrors, reflecting our own inner states of anger, envy, and attachment. Then, with a heart cultivated in patience and compassion, we began to see them as our teachers, providing the very curriculum we need for our growth. Now, having cleansed the doors of perception with the practices of non-judgment and forgiveness, we are ready for the final, most profound, and most beautiful transfiguration of our view. We are ready to see every person we meet, not merely as a mirror or a teacher, but as a bodhisattva in disguise, a sacred emissary of awakening. To understand this, we must first understand the ideal of the bodhisattva. In the Mahayana tradition of Buddhism, a bodhisattva is a being of immense wisdom and compassion who stands at the very threshold of final liberation, of nirvana. They have done the work, they have purified their mind, and they are ready to enter a state of complete and final peace. But in a moment of supreme courage and love, they make a different choice. They look back and see the vast ocean of suffering in which all other beings are still struggling. And moved by a compassion so immense it is incomprehensible, they take a vow. They vow to postpone their own final entry into blissful peace and to willingly return to the messy, difficult world of birth and death again and again until every last being, down to the last blade of grass, has been brought to a state of awakening. The Bodhisattva's vow is the ultimate expression of interdependence. It is the recognition that my freedom is not truly complete until all of us are free. With this ideal in mind, the entire landscape of our relationships is illuminated with a new and sacred light. Every encounter becomes an opportunity to meet one of these awakening beings on their mission of compassion. The difficult person who enrages you is no longer just a teacher of patience. They are the Bodhisattva of patience, manifesting in the exact form necessary to give you the perfect opportunity to perfect this quality. They are playing a difficult and thankless role for the sake of your spiritual growth. Can you imagine the compassion it takes for a being to willingly manifest as someone who is unpleasant and unloved just to help you learn? From this view, our irritation can transform into a profound sense of gratitude. The person you envy, who seems to have everything you desire, is the bodhisattva of aspiration. They are showing you the heights of what is possible, challenging you to transform the poison of your jealousy into the medicine of sympathetic joy, and to clarify your own aspirations for what truly brings happiness. The person in need who appears before you, asking for help, is the bodhisattva of compassion. They are giving you the precious, golden opportunity to actualize your own compassionate heart, to practice generosity, and to experience the joy of service. Without them, your compassion would remain a mere abstract idea. They allow you to make it real. Your loved ones, who mirror your deepest attachments, are the bodhisattvas of unconditional love, teaching you the highest and most difficult practice of all, how to love with freedom, how to care deeply while letting go. Every being becomes a sacred encounter. Every interaction becomes a dance with an agent of your own awakening. There are no more ordinary people. There are no more random events. There is only the sacred play of bodhisattvas helping each other to wake up. The archetypal image of this compassionate activity is the great bodhisattva of compassion known as Avalokiteshvara or Guanyin. The legends say that as Avalokiteshvara attained profound insight, he looked down upon the world and saw the immense, unending suffering of all beings. The sheer scale of it was so overwhelming that in a moment of boundless empathy, his head shattered into 11 pieces so he could see in all directions at once. His arms shattered into 1,000 pieces so he could reach out and help in 1,000 different ways simultaneously. And in the palm of each of his 1,000 hands, an eye appeared. This is deeply symbolic. The 1,000 hands represent compassionate action, the boundless capacity to respond to need in whatever form it appears. But the eye in each hand represents wisdom. This is not blind, sentimental compassion. It is help that is guided by a clear seeing of the true nature of the situation. It is the perfect union of wisdom, prajna, and compassion, karuna. This path teaches us that we are all called to be the hands and eyes of Avalokiteshvara in the world. When you listen deeply to a friend in pain, you are one of Avalokiteshvara's hands, offering the solace of your presence. When you speak a word of truth with kindness to correct an injustice, you are one of his hands. When you forgive someone who has wronged you, you are one of his hands, untying a knot of suffering in the world. When you simply offer a silent wish of loving kindness to a stranger on the street, you are participating in this vast, cosmic project of healing. Our small, seemingly insignificant acts of goodness become imbued with a sacred and universal purpose. This leads to the final, culminating turn on this path. The ultimate lesson is not just to see others as bodhisattvas. It is the dawning realization that we ourselves are being called to become one. The purpose of our practice of developing mindfulness, of cultivating compassion, of seeing emptiness as not, in the end, for our own personal peace of mind. That peace is a wonderful and necessary byproduct, but it is not the final goal. The final goal is to place all the wisdom and compassion we cultivate at the service of others. Our own awakening becomes a resource for the awakening of the world. The central question of our life begins to shift. It is no longer just, how can I be happy? Or what can I learn from this? It becomes, how can I be of service? How can my presence in this moment, my words, my actions, help this other being to suffer less? Every interaction, from the most mundane to the most profound, becomes a field for this practice. The person who cuts you off in traffic becomes an opportunity to practice offering a silent wish of peace for their benefit. The cashier at the store becomes an opportunity to practice offering a moment of genuine human connection and appreciation for their benefit. The family member you struggle with becomes an opportunity to practice listening so deeply that they finally feel heard for their benefit. The circle is now complete. We began by looking at others as a mirror to learn about ourselves. We end the journey by understanding ourselves so that we may be a source of healing for others. We see that self-liberation and service to the world are not two different things, but are the two wings of a single bird. One cannot fly without the other. This is the culmination of the path of the mirror. We have journeyed from seeing others as sources of our suffering to seeing them as our greatest teachers, and finally, to honoring them as sacred bodhisattvas who guide us toward our own awakening, even as we vow to do the same for them. The journey of understanding is complete. All that remains is to gather the wisdom we have found, to hold it gently in our hearts, and to carry it forward as a living, breathing reality into the precious moments of our lives. We began our journey together in a moment of friction, in the quiet sting of a work meeting where a colleague's careless words seemed to steal our peace. We felt the hot flush of anger, the lingering resentment, the sense of being a victim of another's actions. Let us return to that room for a final moment. Imagine that same scene happening now. The words are spoken, but this time something is different. A space opens up. In that space, you notice the heat rising in your chest, but you are not consumed by it. You see the thought, I am being attacked, but you do not have to believe it. You look at your colleague, and you see not an adversary, but a mirror reflecting your own attachment to being right. You see a teacher offering you a perfect chance to practice patience. You see a suffering being acting from their own insecurity, and perhaps you even see a bodhisattva in disguise, playing their difficult role perfectly for the sake of your awakening. The words may be the same, but they no longer have the power to wound you. Your peace is no longer a fragile thing that can be taken away. It is a vast, open space within you, capable of holding the entire experience with grace. This is the fruit of our long journey together. We began by seeing the people we meet as the cause of our problems. We learned to see them as mirrors for our own minds. We grew to see them as our most valuable teachers. And finally, we have learned to honor them as sacred partners in the dance of awakening. We have seen that the path to peace does not lie in changing others, but in transforming ourselves. We have learned that every emotion, no matter how painful, can be transmuted into the path, that the mud of our lives is the very fuel for the lotus of our wisdom. The ultimate message is this: peace is not the absence of difficult people or challenging situations. The world will never stop offering us a curriculum of imperfect, unpredictable, and sometimes painful encounters. Peace is the inner quality of resilience, wisdom, and compassion that we cultivate in the very midst of that chaos. It is the unshakable stability of the mountain that allows the winds of praise and blame to blow past without uprooting it. The goal is not to create a perfect world, but to bring a perfect heart to the world as it is. And so, we leave this shared space not with a complex set of doctrines, but with a simple, profound invitation. This practice does not live in ancient texts or distant monasteries. It lives in this very next moment, the next person you speak with, the next driver who frustrates you, the next loved one who challenges you. That is your teacher. That is your mirror. That is the field of your practice. The curriculum is your own beautiful, messy, and precious life. Look with clear eyes, listen with an open heart, and in every encounter ask the simple question, what is this person, this moment, here to teach me about myself?